You're on 121.5, the emergency frequency.
Welcome to the 21.5 Show, a podcast for professional pilots by professional pilots. Join Dylan and Max, both with experience in flight instruction, the airlines, and business aviation, as they talk to a variety of industry experts, share stories, and have a little fun along the way.
It is the summer. We're back from vacation. Finally, Max, welcome back.
Final vacation.
The final vacation of 2023 summer, we think. This is the 21.5 Show. It's the show for professional pilots who may or may not be working too hard this summer. My name is Dylan. I'm a professional pilot in the field of business aviation, and I'm joined by my co-host, Max. Hello.
Also a professional pilot in business aviation and the airline aviation.
How is the airline aviation? What's your, can folks guess the type of hotel chain you're in right now?
I'm sure you could narrow it down to two, pretty quick.
Yeah.
That would
right.
increase your odds. Right now I'm in a DoubleTree, Chicago.
Can I get a cookie update?
I did eat the cookie last night. I was well under my caloric budget for the day, so I've rewarded myself.
Enjoy. What? So you're flying PMs this trip, it looks like, which, as many folks will know, is not your favorite.
I made This was a trip that got caught up in overlap. For who doesn't know what overlap is, that's a trip on your, in this case, July bid that ran into August, right? So then you bid for August, and sometimes these trips overlap each other. And the company has to, they go in there and fix it and trim one or make it so you're legal and try and probably a deadhead in there and cut. So they cut this trip short, and we had this, thing. And I'm like, oh, no big deal. I'll trade this 2 days somewhere else and blah, blah, blah. And it came time to trade, and it was like blocked from being traded. I'm like, what is going on here? And I called scheduling. I'm like, why is this trip not able to be traded? And there was a contractual thing that I hadn't run into before where, because they trimmed it because it was illegal, means it wasn't eligible to be traded. So here I am working 5 days, a 2-day and a 3-day, and missed our little staycation last night with our families and the whole thing. So you live and learn. Some lessons are learned the hard way.
That's right. I think it would be interesting for folks, maybe not specifically to hear about our vacations this summer because people probably don't care. But I think what would be interesting for us to chat about is the differences between the airlines and business aviation on how you take vacation, sort of how it all works, and when, why it's important. I think vacation in general is something that when you are single or when you don't have children, it's sort of like, it's not that big of a deal. But then once you have kids of a certain age, it's like one of the most important things, I would say. Wouldn't you, from the career standpoint?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, obviously, summer now is so short, at least in Arizona. I remember it used to be like 3 months when I was a kid, and now it's like barely 2.
Yep.
So you have a lot of, condensing of your vacations into the summer, which makes it high demand. And in a seniority-based system, that means you got to wait your turn in line or get crafty if you have the ability to. With vacation trading and everything else.
So let's talk, just for anyone that's listening to the show that doesn't really understand. We're going to talk in very general terms here because every airline contract's a little bit different. But just kind of explain in general, how does vacation work at the airlines? And why is it not realistic for, a new hire to think that they're going to, get vacation in June or July?
Well, at all airlines, you bid for it, just like you bid for everything. And it's based on seniority, and you bid for your however many weeks of vacation you have. Now, what a week of vacation means varies quite a bit between each airline, because it could literally be a week of vacation, like 7 days, like most people in the world understand it, or a week of vacation could mean upwards of 3 weeks off, which we're fortunate enough at our airline with the rules and line bidding and stuff that a week of vacation means, 2 to 3 weeks off, depending on how you bid it and what you do. Whereas I don't know how it works with PBS. Do you?
A little bit, and I'm going to try and explain it in a very general sense. So essentially, at many airlines, what they do is if they've got a line, and let's say, you work like a basic like 4 on, 3 off, 4 on, 3 off type schedule. If you have vacation and any trip that touches vacation on your schedule gets dropped. So that's what Max is saying, where you could have, 2 or 3 weeks off depending on how you bid.
Yeah, and you have 2 trips that start on the very beginning of your vacation and the end of your vacation. So you get those trips off, plus the preceding 4 days you had off on either end, and it starts to add up.
You can, and so that and vacation bidding's weird because people will bid weird lines because it maximizes their vacation drop. So there's all sorts of shenanigans that goes on with vacation, and every airline's a little bit different. PBS, which is preferential bidding system, is a little bit different, where instead of lines of like a predetermined schedule, they basically put stuff, you put like your time off and your training is already on your schedule, and then you're awarded trips that fit around that. And now, again, I've never worked at a PBS airline. This is just from what people have explained to me. But what you do on a week or on a month you have vacation is you have something called vacation low. And so what happens is in a normal, like contractually, you're obligated to fly a certain amount of hours, right, per month, right? So you're usually like 72, or depends on what your airline is. If you have vacation in that month, you're allowed to do something called vacation low, which drops the required amount of hours that you are going to fly, that's going to be put on your schedule for that month. So instead of flying like, 75, it's only going to build your schedule up to, let's say, 50. If that makes sense. So it may just put one less trip on your schedule plus your vacation. So in some ways, it's actually better because what a lot of people do is they bid some weird line to get like the maximum drop, but then they're stuck with these weird trips. Whereas if you're at the right, if you've got the right PBS rules negotiated, you don't have to fly bid some crappy line to maximize your drop, because you just don't have to take as many trips on your schedule.
That was probably part of the negotiation to move from line bidding to PBS,
right. Exactly,
to make it better than just, hey, here's your 7 days off, but we're going to put a trip that ends right before that day and starts right after.
Yeah.
Okay.
So you can still have some preferences. Now, listen, that's very general. I don't want to get a million emails that say, well, at our airline, I'm just trying to explain to people that don't understand anything.
There's usually a lot of shenanigans involved that you have to work it, and you have to know how it works within your contract. And then the other thing, though, is that, again, the airline I work at is known for having a lot of flexibility, right? And then that carries over to vacation. So that being said, every year I've worked here, I have managed to get a summer week of vacation, which is prime time, which I am so far from holding in the bid. Well, maybe not that. I mean, I don't know. Who knows? But my point is, I've never been awarded it, but you can trade. And if you have to literally have to sit down and sometimes draw like a matrix and like, okay, if I trade this guy for this week, then I can trade that week with this guy that wants that week. And then I can trade with this guy. And, or sometimes, dude, I've just been lucky. And I'm like, you put in there, hey, some crappy or whatever week, or sometimes I oftentimes try and bid for weeks that people like. I live in Phoenix, which is a lot of not a very big commuter base. So most of the pilots live in Phoenix. So I look around at other schools and see when their breaks are that people don't think about. Like I shouldn't even say this. I'm probably screwing myself, but I find weeks that people forget about, and senior guys that have more than a couple weeks of vacation whose wives are like, oh, it's October break, we want to go somewhere. And these guys are hoarding summer weeks of vacation. So then you put it in there and like, hey, I'll trade for any summer week between this date and this date when my kids are out of school. And then sometimes I've just been lucky, or some dude first year was like, you're the dude with the lowest seniority that wants a summer week that has the week I want. So congratulations, here you go. And sometimes it's just dumb luck like that. So, but either way, you put some effort in, just like your schedule. A lot of times you can improve it, but you gotta play the shenanigans game.
Exactly. But I think, but back to to your point from earlier, you bid. So this is another interesting thing at the airlines. Again, this is a generality. Probably sometime in the fourth quarter of the year prior, you're going to have a bid come out, and everyone's going to say, okay, bid for your weeks of vacation, and at the airline I was at, it was like, week 1 was January 1st. And then you go.
Yeah, there's rounds of there's rounds and people can block. There's all these different rules. And ours is like in August, I think, or something.
Right. Yeah. Whenever it happens to be. But here's the thing. You got to plan. You got to have a plan ways out,
Yeah,
if you've got specific, like, it's not like you can be like next month, like, oh, well, let's see what's available for vacation, So you may be planning like almost a year in advance. And when you're junior, if you just take what's given to you, those first couple years, you're probably going to be getting vacation in January, February.
Yeah. Hopefully you like skiing, because that's
which is great if you're a skier. But the point is, and I think you've done a good job of explaining it, when you're junior, you really need to know how to work it, right? You need to understand the system.
If you care. If you don't care,
then right.
It's all about
there are still ways
you.
to get vacation during the prime time, but you've got to be very active. It's just like trip trading and anything else. It depends on how much work you want to put into the system to be able to get what you want out of it. But that being said, like, it's another thing that you would want to prepare your spouse for. If you're thinking about jumping into the airlines, listen, we don't just get to take any week of vacation that we want necessarily. There's a little bit of planning and finesse. But you can also, vacation's not the only time you can.
That's what I always say. I said vacation is if you need 2 or 3 weeks off.
Yeah.
There's a lot. I just went on vacation last week for a week, and that I didn't take any time. I didn't get rid of any trips. I didn't even drop anything. I just kind of shuffled stuff around. And sometimes if you're going to do that and not reduce your credit, you're going to hustle it one week and hustle it another one, but you can have the week off, So it just depends on what you want, or you can give stuff away, or you can trade 3 days for 2 days, or what, there's a lot of ways you can work it. So the point is, if you haven't been at the airlines, if you need a week off, or 5 days or something like that, like a normal, what normal people would go on a vacation for, it's not that hard. Like, you can probably plan that and figure it out. Like, that's what have done. Because there's other ways to give yourself a week. Now, if you need, you want to go on a 2-week cruise to Europe, then you need to get a week of vacation is kind of the way I look at it. And that is specifically where I'm at, but it changes everywhere. But the difference between that, so in business aviation, I don't think you can generalize nearly as much. No, because it depends on who's granting the vacation, whether that's, more of a fractional situation, or like you and I have done a lot, Part 91, where you got to talk to the boss and figure out when your vacation is. And that was a struggle for me previously. And realistically, what you did, because they don't want you to take vacation when there's trips, because then they got to pay somebody to fly when they think they're already paying you to fly. And the way I got around that was planning in advance, because people with private jets don't necessarily plan in advance that much because they don't have to. So you just plan a trip, be like, hey, I need vacation. Do you have anything going on in 6 months out? And they're like, no. And I'm like, okay, I'm going to buy airline tickets, book hotels, go on this vacation. So I just want to make sure that we're good with this. And they're like, and that was the way in my situation, I dealt with that. But then and I still do some corporate flying. And if you have an owner that's very sympathetic to, and is a family person and values his time with his family, then they will a lot of times value that time with your family and say, hey, yes, I get your kids. I had young kids. It's the summer. It's prime time. You need to take your kids on a cruise, take it. And if I got to fly, we'll find somebody. It's no big deal. And there's that end too. So I don't know. What's your experience been? Well,
I think your point is great. Yeah. Front running the owner is usually the key when it comes to the schedule. But hopefully this starts to help you to think about the questions that you need to ask when you're looking at jobs. What do you do in the summer? I would say, especially in places like Phoenix where it's really hot, most people that own a jet probably aren't hanging out in Phoenix very often. So, it's not uncommon for people to have houses in different places, and maybe you just drop them off and they're there all summer and you have, most of the summer off. There's certainly jobs like that, especially here. And then there's, people that need to be ferried back and forth all the time for work. So there's a lot of good questions that you can start thinking about, like, hey, run me through a typical summer. What does it look like? Again, if you've got kids, if you, the pilot, have kids, then, this is a key thing to think about. So in general, I would say, I can't speak to everybody, but in my situation, you can, if flexibility is really the key. And there are ways, to vacation quite a bit during the summertime if you're willing to be a little flexible in how you do it. And I've done quite a bit of vacationing this summer and just kind of had to modify things as trips come up and the needs change. And we're in a great position to do that because my wife doesn't have a full-time job right now. So I would say on the business end of this, business aviation end of the spectrum, if you have flexibility during the summertime and you don't need things to be too rigid, I think there's definitely scenarios where you could end up with more vacation even than an airline person if you're flexible. Again, not booking, cruises to Europe, 2 week long cruises to Europe. But if you have like a summer house or something like that, that's just a drive away, maybe a few hours away or something like that, you can probably end up working it pretty good. So I think there are ways.
The benefit is, as you often do as a corporate pilot, having a bunch of hotel points. Exactly. It's always a good way to exercise those because a lot of times you don't have to, you can be flexible, cancel stuff, move it around, whatever.
That was my next point. We don't do Airbnbs and that kind of stuff so much because you usually have to commit too far out. But hotel points, you can be flexible. You could say, oh, we're going to go here. Oh, no, I actually need to change it. We need to slide it 3 days, back and forth, that kind of stuff. So I think there are a lot of benefits on the corporate side if you have the flexibility to take advantage of them. And not everybody does.
Well, and then, of course, that flexibility goes away when school's in session, if you have kids in school, because then you're limited to weekends and holiday weekends, which is the worst because everybody wants to get out of town.
Everyone wants to get out of town.
There's always that struggle. We'll end this discussion on vacation with this. What's funny is that a lot of times in business aviation, you lead the owner, you get your vacation, and then all of a sudden now he wants to do something, right? Or she or whoever, and they call you. So I remember when at my last corporate job before I came to the airlines, where the owner had this last kind of shorter notice trip. He wanted to go to Las Vegas from San Diego, which is where he spent the summer. So the airplane's in San Diego. I'm like, well, yeah, I can airline out to San Diego. We can go to Vegas. But our other pilot, he's on his honeymoon. And he's, I don't even remember where he was, but in the
Bay
US,
Area, I think.
Yeah,
I think it was the Bay Area.
Maybe Reno. I don't know, somewhere.
Yeah.
And I'm like, that's his honeymoon, dude. I'm not telling him he has to come back. I'm like, I'll call him and ask him, see if we can, work something out. And I call him. He's like, well, and this is where you can kind of negotiate a little bit. Mm-hmm. He's like, well, if you wants to fly me and my wife and she can ride on the plane to Vegas, we'll go to Vegas. And so he was super cool and, super laid back, chill guy. He was being flexible, but it was going to work out. He was going to bring his wife that is, ride in the private jet. It'd be just a cool story, whatever. So I'm like, okay. So then I look at trying to get him from where he's at to San Diego, and it can't do it. Like, I can't get him there in time just on the airline schedule. So we ended up airlining him to LA and chartered him a helicopter.
No, I forgot about this part.
Dude, and so we're sitting on the Gulfstream. I have it, the AP running, everything ready to go. All the passengers in the back, they're just kind of having drinks and hanging out. This helicopter, it was like an R-44, right on the opposite line, literally right on the opposite line facing the Gulfstream, right? Lands. Our other pilot and his wife hop out. They walk up the airplane, send her back. I think it was a guy's trip to Vegas. So we sent her back to the Wolves, and my buddy sits down and, we shut the door, he gets caught up and we blast off.
I forgot about the helicopter part. Well, the funny thing is, remember, I was going to do I wasn't rated in the Gulfstream. So we were going to go do the 3 takeoffs and landings. That was like the backup plan. Yeah.
Because I couldn't, I think, what was it? I couldn't find anybody
couldn't find anybody. Yeah. It was like super last minute. So you called me, you're like, hey, can you go? We'll go do the 6158 and get you legal. And we got like approval and everything. And it was this whole big fiasco. Now that you say the helicopter thing, I remember because you called me, you're like, we're not going to need you. Our pilot said we're good. Like he'll just come down. And then you called me back. You're like, no, actually, we might need you because we can't get him a flight. And, it was this whole big thing. But but you know what? That story illustrates exactly the type of situation where there are some cool perks in being in business aviation if you are flexible. And here's the real key: if your spouse is flexible. And I think if you're listening to this and maybe you're on the fence of like, what is better, for my personal fit, what your spouse is comfortable doing is going to play a huge part in the difference between airlines and business aviation. And there are some incredible benefits, but if your spouse or your partner is not really like a go with the flow type of person, that can mean, they can definitely help you figure that out.
That wants to plan on their vacation a year out, then what's for you.
And then you're like, oh, cool. Well, we're going to go fly a helicopter to Vegas. And who knows? We didn't know this 10 hours ago, and now we're doing this crazy thing. And I really have to hand it to my wife and your sister, Lindsay. She was not that person with a lot of flexibility in the beginning, and now she has really come a long way in the 14 years we've been married, and she does really good rolling with the punches. And,
she's learned to adapt.
She adapts, and we make the best of it. And honestly, it has been great. If you have the flexibility, it's great. Not everybody does. Listen,
well, and it's remember when we were both corporate pilots and our kids were younger, we had RVs, and we'd go camping and hang out until we had to go back, and then we just went back. It wasn't that big of a deal. It was fun. So
yeah. So hopefully this discussion's been helpful. I don't know. It was just kind of interesting to think about the differences and the similarities and differences of the different vacation worlds. So
yeah, it is. And that the airline type of vacation holds a different amount of value depending on how it works in the business. Because some people just get tortured, dude, with vacation that we've seen, where people that give it and then they want to take it and change, and are very heavy handed with it, which is nowadays is not a good recipe for longevity with your pilots. But
exactly. And it's hard to communicate. It's definitely something I never thought of as a younger pilot, was like the importance of this once you have kids.
But what's funny is with seniority comes more weeks of vacation and better bidding power. Dude, there are people that be like, oh, so they use a vacation and they like, I just take the summer off. I'm like, what? And dude, they stack vacation that overlaps, and they literally leave and take the summer off.
This is another reason, like we kind of talk about with Nick in the interview coming up. Like that's the most senior people with the most vacations. Like these people trying to extend to age 67, 68 even,
right.
With these people
5
with,
weeks
10
of
weeks
vacation,
of vacation.
Dude, that turns into 2 or 3 weeks. Like do the math. That's a lot of time off, paid time off, plus sick time. I mean, there's so much of that. It's amazing how much time off you can get.
Yeah.
It's just, and it's funny because the people that are senior, it's always this really terrible paradigm. Whereas when you're junior and you have young kids and the weekends and the summers, everything, and then you're flying, say, on the weekend, right? And you fly the captain. He's like, I don't want to fly I don't want to be home on the weekend. You know how hard it is to get a tea time and go to dinner on a Saturday? Who wants to do that? I fly Friday, Saturday, Sunday, so I can golf on, Monday, Tuesday.
Yeah, exactly.
Just like, dude, you're killing me right now.
So it's just like everything else.
You choose to fly the weekend because it's too inconvenient. It's so funny.
That is the challenges of this profession, but also some of the benefits. All right. Well, hopefully that was a helpful discussion. We had an awesome summer. I know you had an awesome summer. I think at the end of the episode, Max, we should talk about the relaxing little vacation that we enjoyed together a couple days ago.
Camp Calamity. Is that what you called it?
Yeah. Camp Chaos.
Camp Chaos.
Yeah,
that's what it was.
Yeah, we'll save that for the end of the episode. We've got a great episode coming up for you. Sir Nik Fialka of the Ready for Pushback podcast and a career coach at Spitfire Elite will be joining us. He is a pro podcaster himself, so it's going to be a great discussion on kind of the state of the industry. We talk a little bit about retirements, like we mentioned, some of the things he's seeing in the hiring world, and some of the interviews he's done with some of the titans of our industry. Very impressive. So look forward to that. We've got flight advice coming up. And of course, our mailbag, which is quite full because we took a few weeks off. And let's start off with some reviews, Max. Got a couple.
Right.
To read here.
Hilarious and informative. Started with the Roger Reeves episode and stayed for the humor. Max and Dylan have taken a new approach to aviation podcast shows. I find them to be informative and hilarious. Keep up the good work, guys. Oh, and Joel, I hope you get to fly the majestic PC-12 one day. Winky emoji. Unfortunately, Joel is not with us this episode, so we will be reading our own mailbag today.
Is he? But I don't think he's out flying a PC-12.
Yeah, I don't think
Maybe
so.
he is.
Probably the Muscalero still. Who knows?
That's right. That was from RKCL. Thank you for the review. If you shoot us an email, info@215podcast.com, and give me your mailing address, we'll shoot you some 215 stickers. And we'll do that for anybody that'll leave us a review on Apple, Spotify, or wherever you get your podcasts. Even on YouTube. We're getting a lot of comments lately, too. Next up is the mailbag, which is, of course, brought to you by our friends at Advanced Aircrew Academy, aircrewacademy.com, to visit their impressive catalog, all of their educational courses available to professional pilots in business aviation. Listen, if you've got 135 certificate where there's required training for your pilots, there is an alternative to that 3-letter training solution that most pilots despise. You can use Aircrew Academy's solution. It's well written by professional pilots. It's not dry. It's even funny sometimes. I'll tell you, we did the runway excursion course, Max. I remember there's a couple of funny questions written in there. I think it's just a check to make sure you're alive and paying attention. So it's a refreshing change from the industry standard, and that's just one of the courses that they have available. See the show notes for the link, aircrewacademy.com. Here we go into the mailbag. I'll read this first one here just because it's kind of I had to look this one up. It says, hey guys, is there any way to listen to archive podcasts? I was going back through the old ones and found the Calvin Harris juicing story hilarious from episode 2. A few weeks later, I went to play it for my buddy and it had been booted out of the episode list because it's too old. And that's from Jeff. Jeff, I had to remove that recipe from the internet. Calvin Harris's lawyers contacted me.
You got a cease and desist on the juice recipe?
Cease and desist. It's a proprietary recipe. No. So it turns out that Apple Podcasts, which I'm assuming that you're using to listen, if you go to the show and you click on episodes, so if you go and find our show and click on it, if you've already listened to that episode, it no longer shows under the available episodes. It just shows the unplayed ones. So there's a little button on the right that says see all, and you have to push that see all button to show every single one. And I actually just figured that out the other day because I was trying to find an episode of re-listen to the Big Booty Mix podcast.
Yeah, that's how I figured that out too.
I'm like, where is it? So you have to click the see all. So listen, if you want to go enjoy some good poolside music, check that one out. But that's how you do it. And let us know if you're going to recreate that juice recipe. It is actually delicious.
What was the secret? Wasn't it cayenne pepper? Was that the secret ingredient?
Cayenne pepper, the ginger or the beet, fresh beet in there really brought out the
added some nice color too, right?
Yeah, it was a little sketchy in the white pilot shirt, juicing that in the Atlantic Aviation kitchen. You can tune into episode 2 if you want to hear the whole story about that. Shout out to Calvin Harris. We should his summer song. I don't know. I haven't heard from him lately. I'm not sure where he's at, but
he's carries jump drive around the country still.
Yeah,
making millions of dollars.
Making millions. All right, what's next?
Piper, Apache, Aztec, Cherokee Warrior, Seminole, Navajo, Cheyenne. Why is the military trying to get in on Piper's action? Also, I've flown with guys who bring travel guitars, harmonicas, juggling balls. I guess I don't have an issue with the violinist. Beats slogging out a 4-day with the work guy from the Lego videos or the 4-day Fox News rants. I figure he brought it to practice in his hotel or overnights or something. Heck, remember the guy with the Roger Victor puppet? He brought that thing on trips to make his videos. How'd you like to be the TSA guy x-raying that guy's bag and seeing a Muppet rolled up in there? Well, another day of this shit again. Should have done it in front of the packs. Beats me. I guess if you've got it, flaunt it. Cheers, Mike in Dallas. I think this is just a testament to, put it this way, when an investment banker goes maybe on a work trip, you don't see them bringing a travel guitar or juggling balls. You know why?
Yeah.
Because they were working the whole time.
Yeah.
So I think this is just kind of a testament of what there was a guy that someone was telling me about here. There were I'm going to screw this up because I don't remember the specific, but his goal was to walk 100 miles at work in a year. So it was some crazy deal, dude. And he would go
100 miles
and he would land. I think he was an AM dude. So he'd get there in the afternoon and he would just walk. He might walk 10 miles or no, it was more. It was 1,000 miles. It was 1,000
I was going to say
miles.
100 miles wouldn't be that hard.
Because I remember that he was saying he'd sometimes walk, 10 miles on an overnight or whatever. So I think it was 1,000 miles at work. And I think he exceeded his goal at the end of the year and walked over 1,000 miles.
I would maybe limit the walks at the Houston Hobby and Chicago Midway.
No, but that's the thing.
Overnight
To achieve the goal, you couldn't be picky. Like you would slug it out in the humidity or the cold of Chicago, whatever. Like that's the thing.
Was he senior enough to where he could like control his overnights?
I don't know. But even so, you can't only be having overnights where the weather is mild. It just doesn't happen in this job. And I remember to be able to achieve the goal, that was the thing. If you're doing San Diego overnights the entire year, it would still be impressive, but not that impressive. But the fact that you're flying all over the place and the weather is oftentimes not optimal was the real.
Right. 8 times 12. Yeah. So like if you just did 3 days at your airline and flew every week, you'd only have 96 overnights in a year.
Yeah,
if you
so
flew
it's like
every
10 miles.
week, which you're not.
Like 10 miles.
So yeah.
I think that's what that started to. I think that's what it was. I think it was 1,000 miles in a year.
Gee,
so he would hit the ground, change, and try and walk 10 miles before it was time to have dinner or whatever.
Maybe he just said that because he didn't like flying with you.
But dude, what if you have a short overnight? Like to knock out 10 miles of walking, that's a tall order.
Hey, Jim, the hotel van's here. You ready to go to? No, I think I'll just walk.
Jim, what's with the headlamp? I'm not going to be back till after dark. He's got a flashing caution. Yeah. What's with the yellow vest and the flashing red light on the back?
You guys already get the yellow vest, right? Don't you use it for the walk around? He just keeps it in his bag.
Only in Mexico, my friend.
Okay. Oh, man. Well, that's interesting. Okay.
Yeah. Anyway, my point is, it's a pretty good gig if you have to bring instruments with you to work to
that's true.
Occupy yourself.
Hey, has anyone? My son's super into the Rubik's Cube now. And so he's like cubing all the time, like when we're driving. Has anyone brought a Rubik's Cube into the cockpit that you've seen? That one I feel like would actually be good because it's like the mental stimulation, and you're like, that seems like a good cockpit activity.
Yeah, I cannot,
like a Sudoku sort of.
I cannot show up to work without like a lot of things to entertain me or to do.
You should get into cubing, bro. Next email says, Dylan and Max, so this week we were in the process of moving from Jacksonville, Florida to Traverse City, Michigan. So I saved 3 episodes for my road trip. The last one was freaking hilarious. You guys had me belly laughing in the car. I think that's the one we did with Rob Patton. This popped up in my searches so you can use it as a baseline for your point system. And he sent an article for the 20 best chain restaurants in America. Now,
we really need to get back to categorizing this because it's funny because my 8-year-old son, we were on a long drive the other day, and he asked to listen to it. So I put that one on, and I forgot about that. I'm like, God, and I really was starting to give it some thought about like these different.
Maybe we
tiers.
do a live show. Maybe that's the next live show.
I know we really need some.
We have a big ranking. So he sent this article, Greg. This is great. The top 20 best chain restaurants. Now the only problem is it's about 7 years old. So this is 2016. So I'm not actually sure all of these restaurants
in the chain restaurant
are still around. But like there's some ones we didn't think about, like Cracker Barrel's on there, PF Chang's, Cheddar's. Cheesecake Factory. But I think
that's a good one too.
Do you want to know what the number one was? Can you guess?
Like number one in what?
Like number one on this list.
Number one.
Who knows how they developed this list? It's just called clickbait, just baloney. But your son would actually really approve of this list.
It's steak restaurant.
Yes.
Ruth's Chris.
No, that's a great guess, but no. Number 2 was Longhorn Steakhouse, where your 8-year-old had his birthday party.
His birthday dinner, not party.
Birthday dinner, yeah. And then number 1 was Texas Roadhouse.
Number 1?
Number 1 on their list.
I'd never been to a Texas Roadhouse till recently. I had a deadhead flight from Las Vegas. I finished trip. It was like Las Vegas to Phoenix, and some dude had picked up a turn that was deadhead to Las Vegas, fly Las Vegas to Phoenix. So he looked and saw me deadheading. It's like, hey, will you swap with me? So then he would have a trip that was deadhead both directions, and then you call and you drop the deadheads and you get paid for flying 2 legs when you don't get off the couch. It's a pretty good deal, right? So
that's a good deal.
What's in it for me? Really, nothing, but just to be cool. I'm like, yeah, dude, I'll do it for you. Karma kind of thing. So he did that. He sent me a gift card, like texted me a gift card for the Texas Roadhouse. I'm like, do we even have one of those around? And then
we do. It's actually just down the street.
Yeah, it was relatively new, right? And so,
yeah,
that was.
Did you throw your peanut shells on the ground?
I don't think you do. Do you do that there? I don't remember. I went. My kids really like that cinnamon butter that you put on the biscuits.
Oh yeah, yeah. Man, they know what they're doing. That's the real thing with these chain restaurants is they've all figured out like it's the rolls and the butter and the like Olive Garden and in these places they know that's what really gets people in.
The free
we
stuff.
Should just start a restaurant called like Free Bread, like free pre-meal bread. And you just
it's so terrible though from a restaurant standpoint, like. Or in like Mexican restaurant too with the chips and salsa. It's like
exactly.
The appetizer ordering has got to be way down, but it's a thing. It works.
There it is. All right, that was from Greg. Thank you, Greg. We're going to continue this conversation at some point. Okay, next on the email list, Paul and
wait,
Thomas,
hold on.
Both.
I just remember we just totally glazed over the Roger Victor puppet reference. Do you remember those videos, dude?
Yeah.
That's hilarious. I just wanted to say, if you haven't seen those videos, Google Captain Roger Victor on YouTube. It's really funny.
Yeah. We'll put a link in there. Now, that was somebody we should probably talk to at some point. The puppet. We'll do that one on video.
Maybe we should get a Joel puppet. That way, when Joel's not here.
Yeah. That'd be great.
We could talk about farm stuff and.
Yeah, it'd be great. It'd be perfect. Oh, so, speaking of this, you were talking about, remember Joel interviewed this guy in a tractor, right?
Yeah.
Speaking of vacation, and he's sitting on the side on the wheel well of the tractor.
He's awkwardly perched next to this farmer on a tractor. It was enclosed cab though.
With a microphone. Joel's day job. If you don't know,
here we are with Ken.
So I on one of my vacations this summer, I went up and visited my family in Oregon. My dad, for those of you that know my dad, the 21.5 Apostle, he's Mr. Do-It-Yourself. He and my brother-in-law bought a D6 dozer, a 1960s D6 dozer to clear some land. And so I'm in there driving it with him, and he has to. It's only certain things work. One clutch works, one brake works. He's working half of it, sitting on the wheel well while I'm driving it. And I mean, it was just reminding me of that scene with Joel, but it was actually really fun. So
I would have appreciated a video.
You really have a lot of respect for heavy equipment operators. And they're not doing the Rubik's Cube and juggling and doing all this stuff while they're driving the machine like we are. There's a Sudoku for the guys on the cat.
That's right. Listen, Dylan.
So shout out for all those.
As a
guys.
Recent tractor owner, I feel like I'm really in a position to sympathize with the heavy equipment operators. My 20 horsepower truck. I
actually would love to get a poll, because everyone says in airline captains, they all own boats, but I'd love to know the boat to tractor ratio for airline guys. I bet it's closer than you would think.
I don't know about that.
We want to give a shout out to Paul and Thomas, who both submitted more items for the Teterboro Layover Guide. I've updated those. You can visit our website and check out the Layover Guides. You do one click and it shoots it all into your phone on Google Maps as a saved thing, and it's always there. So when you're on a layover, you can just see what other pilots recommend. Super cool. We'll have a link for that in the show notes. Next email. Do you want to read this one?
Hey guys, I thought I'd write and tell you what I love about your show. I'm 18 years old and do not have my pilot's license yet, but your show is still super interesting to me. Hopefully someday I will be able to get my private pilot license, though. Currently, I'm running a lawn business for my dad, and I have plenty of time to listen to podcasts while I do that. I was just curious if any of you guys have flown into Lubbock or Amarillo. I live about halfway between those two airports, and I was curious if you've flown into either of those airports. By the way, Joel's preference of best airplane is a very good one. I think the PC-12 is an absolutely lovely airplane. Keep the show going and keep doing what you've been doing. Oh, and Max does sound like Bert from Sesame Street. I hope you read this email on the podcast. Thanks, Quentin.
Oh, Quentin, you
Ernie.
hit all of the highlights.
I know. A true fan. I have flown into Amarillo. I have not flown into Lubbock. Somehow,
What?
I have avoided. I don't know.
How is that possible?
I don't. And I actually want to go because it's getting to be fewer and fewer places that this airline flies that I have not been, and somehow that is one of them. And I've had trips with Lubbock, and I've traded out of them and stuff just because of whatever else, not because of Lubbock, but
Lubbock is for lovers.
Lubbock. Is
I used to fly the commuter turboprop and jet out of Dallas, so I have been to pretty much every small town in Texas. Definitely been to Lubbock. Shout out to the Freebirds burrito shop there in Lubbock for the college kids. And then Amarillo is a classic. That was in a classic American Eagle overnight. And remember the steak place where you had to eat like a huge steak and you'd get it for free?
No.
Yeah. I'm going to look it up here. Tell a funny story here.
You're
While
going
I
to put
look
this on the
up.
Amarillo destination guide?
Yeah. Yeah, right.
Start that out.
72-ounce steak. You eat it for free. It's the Big Texan Steak Ranch. So you have to eat a 72-ounce steak.
It's like in The Great Outdoors with John Candy. You ever seen that movie?
Mm-hmm.
Where he's got to do the
Right,
same thing,
yeah.
and he's like, oh, and the guy walks up. You forgot about the fat.
I'm going to read you the rules here. Yeah. Here are the rules. The entire meal must be completed in 1 hour. If any of the meal is not consumed, you lose. Before the time starts, you will be allowed to cut into the steak and take one bite. If the steak tastes good and is cooked to your satisfaction, we will start the time. The time will not stop and the contest is on, so make sure you say yes when you're ready. Once you have started, you are not allowed to stand up, leave your table, or have anyone else touch the meal. You will be disqualified if anyone assists you in cutting, preparing, or eating your meal. This is your contest. You do not have to eat the fat, but we will judge this. Should you become ill, the contest is over. You lose. Please use container provided as necessary. You are required to pay the full amount up front. If you win, we will refund you. You must sit at the table that we assign. If you do not win the steak challenge, you are welcome to take the leftovers with you. No consumption or sharing of the leftovers is allowed in the restaurant once the contest is over. If you fail to complete the challenge, you must pay the full $72. I've heard of some dudes at the regional level doing this and succeeding.
Only in America, dude.
Yeah.
Do we do this to ourselves?
72-ounce steak. Whew. That's a lot.
That's
so,
gross.
yeah. So Quentin, we have been to those cities. There's a lot. That part of Texas is a special part of the country. We enjoy it. And shout out to you for working hard in the lawn care business already. Set aside a couple bucks if you can and get your private pilot's license. You know what I would do? I'd look into some of the scholarships that are available out there for folks that are working on their licenses. More and more people are out there ready to support the next generation of pilots coming up. So shout out to you. All right. Next episode. Or next email. Loyal listener, since episode 95, I celebrate the entire Cadillac with two exceptions. I could not make it through Roger Reeves, and I felt compelled to voice my disapproval of the Music Man. I would rather spend a 4-day trip with an inoperative temp dial while flying with the turn off the heat guy than listen to another song like that. So help me if this becomes a thing in training. I'm hanging up my epaulets. Okay, and then he sends a link to the turn off the heat thing. Have you listened to this?
No. Oh, yes, I have. Yes, I have. Yes, I have.
Where the flight instructors telling this foreign student to turn the heat off.
Yeah, it's so funny.
So he says, turn off the heat. P.S. Keep working on those. In those audio clips, they are gold. The furlough flute and do it live set. The standard cracks me up every time. Thanks for a good show. All right. Well, thanks for sharing your opinion. I do not share it. I thought that those videos
obviously
were hilarious.
We thought it was hilarious, but
great. Yeah, but that's okay. different strokes. And that's what's cool about what they're doing is what Rob's doing is everybody learns a little bit differently. And so for people that learn that way, that's great. And that's a new avenue that really didn't exist before. So, and if you enjoyed Death by PowerPoint, that's certainly available too. So great email. Okay. That is going to do it for the mailbag. Thanks to everyone for writing in. info@215podcast.com. If you've got something to say, positive or negative, we'll read all of the emails. And of course, the mailbag is brought to you by Advanced Aircrew Academy, aircrewacademy.com. Thank you very much. Okay, coming up, our conversation with Sir Nik Fialka. We're ready for Pushback Podcast and Spitfire Elite Consulting. You're really going to enjoy this one. I know we had a blast talking to him. Let's get right to it. Max, we are so excited and delighted to have Sir Nik Fialka joining us. He's the host of the Ready for Pushback podcast, piloted a major airline, and a career coach at Spitfire Elite.
Oh, man. What's up, guys? First off, it is awesome to be on my favorite podcast. And I am so stoked that I get to sit here and drink coffee with you guys. In the pre-show, we've been talking for, I don't know, like 30 minutes already, just chatting because I'm such a fan. So thank you for humoring me and bringing me on.
Wait, Nick, are you actually a knight also?
Yeah, it's a funny, it's a boring story, but yeah.
No. Go ahead. I gotta hear this.
When I did some work with the military in Africa in 2019, and we did a lot of really cool stuff and brought a lot of humanitarian aid to some parts of that continent that were that had some really bad stuff happen to them. And anyway, I did all this stuff with the military, and when I got back, I got a call from a friend who was somehow attached to the Prince of Ethiopia, and he actually lives in the United States because he got diplomatic asylum because his family was overthrown, and now Ethiopia has a prime minister instead of a king and a queen. So this gentleman called me up and they asked me if I would be interested in receiving this honorary position. And it was really kind of surreal, kind of people like, I take a lot of pride in it, and it's a really neat thing to just have. So now I have like this big medal and a big sheepskin thing that says it, and it's written in fancy handwriting, and but anyway, that's cool. That's how it kind of came to be. And I don't talk about it a whole lot. I've never even talked about it on my podcast. So now only the 50 million people that listen every week to the 215 podcast.
Breaking news.
Yeah.
Did you get any sort of weapon along with this knighthood?
Like
a sword or spear or anything?
I wish I did. I do have a spear from when I was in Southeast Africa. That this guy who made spears sold me a spear. It's a Zulu spear. It's pretty neat. So, but it's not from the prince. He does have his own sword though. It's a pretty big broadsword. Kind of crazy.
Wow. I didn't see that one coming, Nick. But that's not why we have you on the show. Not because of your knighthood, Nick, but because of your aviation prowess.
No. Actually, I'm changing course here. The reason we've got Nick on the show is because it appears that Nick might be a fellow Ferrari Scuderia fan. Formula One team. Are you, in fact, a fellow fan of Ferrari?
Big Bonolo guy?
I love Toto. He's my favorite.
Oh, doesn't.
Mikey.
Mike, no. That's not right.
Oh man, no, I do. I'm a big Ferrari fan. I love Ferrari. I grew up in a household that kind of worshiped the team. My dad is an immigrant from Austria, so he was a big F1 guy, and I got this mug that I'm drinking out at the factory, and I was fortunate enough to kind of get this tour and to just spend some time talking with people on the assembly line. And it's cool when you go out there in Modena, they've got the people that work there straight up wear the race jumpsuit. And that's so fun to see. Everybody's walking around in race suits. And I'm like, God, this is so cool. Where do I get one?
Do they have a gift shop where you can get one?
There is, I don't know if you can get the thing, but there's a gift shop where you can get this mug. And I've had this mug for 10 years now. I drink out of it every day. I think about the fact that I have no money and I have 5 kids and I'll never own a Ferrari.
And that we're probably not winning a constructors championship anytime soon.
That's right.
That's a conversation for another day. Anything else you want to brag about real quick, Nick, before we get going?
Man, I'm just a list of things. This is going really as well as I had hoped. I'll tell you what I'll brag about. I think I may have brought you, let's see, I've brought you 3 guests on the 21.5 podcast.
Yes. Let's recap that. Go ahead.
Do you remember who they are?
Well, I'm going to start with the most important guest you brought, and that's your wife.
All right.
Anna.
That's my wife, Anna.
She was on the episode where we talked to different spouses of pilots, and when we talked about what's it like to be married to a professional pilot, Anna shared her story about being married to a military pilot who transitioned to the airlines. And by the way, I just had a quick 1, 2, 3, 4. No, let's make it 5 kids in the process. That is still, I don't know if I've told you this recently, but still our most popular episode of all time. So
sweet.
So yes,
that's because I keep downloading it.
Yeah, it's because your kids keep downloading it.
I think it's interesting though. It's a show for pilots that want to know what it's like to be married to a pilot.
Yeah, it's all the wives. What am I getting into?
Yeah,
this is why there's a pilot shortage. They hear it and they're like, nope,
cancel.
I think that's like part of their these guys that are on like dating apps and once after the first date they're like, hey, maybe you just want to listen to this real quick. Just
that was our goal. Yeah.
Into. And that's just help propagate it.
Who else have you sent our way?
I sent you Landon Chebin.
Yeah.
Landon is an Army 160th pilot, and he told a really cool story at the end. If you have not listened to that episode, you should certainly listen to it. That is a great episode.
And that one is also in our top 5 of all time. Dang, you might have good taste in guests. Okay. Number 3.
And I sent you Eric Sabiston from RTAG. Eric is awesome. He founded RTAG with Joshua Lee and a couple other awesome fellas that help out the military people that are enlisted and officers transition into an airline role once they get out. And they do a great job. It's an awesome charity and one of my favorites.
Also one of our all-time most popular downloaded. And remember, if you in that interview, he talked about that helmet that he made. Do you remember that, Max? That Icarus device where it could like frost over and replace foggles and stuff. I think that's he's found some a lot of success recently. I think he landed a couple of big contracts with that. So
they did. They
I think I saw that in
the Army.
And I thought I saw something similar to that in Fly Magazine recently.
Yeah, it's really starting to accelerate. It's a really great product. It really is helpful. I got to see it last October and it's just such a cool thing. So definitely shout out to the Icarus device. If you need better IFR training than foggles and cheating and lifting your head up a little bit to see if you're on the lineup, that's a great device.
Better than the hood. I liked the hood that we had that was basically like a cut off half plastic milk jug that you'd strap to your head. You can make that fog too.
Sporties makes a lot of money on those.
Exactly.
I like as the instrument flying has become so much more complex with the glass cockpit and everything. Now we've got a really good way to block your vision finally.
So
even though
you can
it's
look at the
SES now on the screen. No one who wants to cheat anymore anyway. They should.
Yeah. Right, the opposite. We need a device that forces people to look outside. I think that's what we really need.
Yeah, that's what I mean. That's what we should invent. The big thing that goes over the screen.
Like the bifocal.
It goes has a little cutout, just a little cutout for airspeed or something.
Maybe it just turns it back into a 6-pack with steam gauges.
Yeah, then no one will know what they're looking at.
Fits on the G3X.
It'll be perfect. All right. So, Nick, you've impressed us with your ability as a podcast guest host scout. And you're so good at it, you decided to start your own podcast. And you've already dropped more than 50 episodes for folks to listen to. It is called the Ready for Pushback Podcast. And you've had some really interesting guests yourself on that show. And I think one of the strengths that you have and one of the types of guests that you've had on your show that we really haven't is you've spoke to a lot of folks that actually work at the airlines. You've spoken to a CEO, David Nealman, which many folks know from JetBlue and Breeze. You've talked to recruiters, I think several recruiters from different major airlines. And so I think you've got a little bit of perspective and maybe learned some things that we really haven't explored. So I'm just curious if you wanted to share with us a little bit about kind of some of the interesting tidbits you've gained from some of the guests that you've talked to.
Yeah, I will say this first, like the whole idea of this podcast came from listening to you guys. And I've been listening to you guys since the second episode is when I kind of came across it. And I used to ride my bike in Fort Worth and put in the headphones and just go ride. And I'd listen. I'd gain, like once the furlough flute was introduced and all the fun stuff, that is my favorite thing. And I talk about the furlough flute and then I give you guys a shout out because I love it. It's so dang funny. But I'll tell you, I decided to do this podcast because a lot of what's out there's this mystery that surrounds pilot hiring. Hey, there's a pilot shortage. Hey, we're hiring pilots. Hey, we want you to be a pilot. And traditionally, all of the airlines, every company that is looking to hire, they've kept this little secret, and they've had this little secret that they put in their pocket and they don't want you to know about. And they are bringing people in to interview that have no idea what they're getting into. And I'm like, it's just so dumb to have this thing hidden and you evaluate somebody based on a surprise. And that's what we had tried to do at Spitfire Elite is dive deeper, understand the questions, what they're looking for in the answers, and help people understand how to articulate themselves to not just, you don't have to know every question, but what you do need to know is the deeper meaning of what they're asking and why they're looking for a response and what they're grading you on. And from that, I had this idea of, man, we just need to talk to these people. We need to reach out and talk to them. And I told Tron Williams who's the owner of Spitfire Elite, and Bill Sims, the co-owner, and they said, yeah, we should have a podcast and you should do it. I was like, no, I'm not the guy there. You should hire somebody. And so they're like, no, you already work for us, so you're going to do it. Here's a microphone. And I started going to the conventions and picking up business cards from people and then just emailing them incessantly. And the idea is to talk to people about the airline and give them a chance to showcase their company and why it's great to work for them. And they talk to me for as long as they will. And I get to ask the questions that I wanted to know when I was going through this, because when I was going through this, there was no roadmap. And my goal is to help the pilot from flight school all the way until they're at their final job, whatever their dream airline is, whatever life puts in the way, and the furlough flute starts up again and you're stuck at this one regional and all of a sudden you're a lifer because your kids are too old and you can't transition to a major. All this stuff is going to happen, and I want to talk about it all because I want to give good perspective. And you guys did such a good job of giving me a base for that and a foundation for that. And so that's what I do. And what's funny is I started doing this, I released the podcast, and it went nuts. It's unbelievably successful. And now I've got this waiting list for like directors of hiring and CEOs that all want to talk to me. And I'm like, hey, I'm not recording this month. You're going to have to wait. And it's funny to be on this trajectory to be able to pick up the phone, make the call, and those people pick up the phone when I call. It's funny and it's cool because I think the pilot that listens deserves to know what they're getting into. And that's what I'm trying to do. So I've been talking probably for 5 minutes, and hopefully you got a little taste of what the show's all about.
Absolutely. It's the exciting new form of media that we have right now, especially these specialized conversations that we can have that, like you said, when we were younger, they just didn't exist. And now these niches that we can get into are so exciting. And that's why what you're doing is so cool because you have found this niche where people want to talk to you, and you could provide this special information for folks. So can you share, like, I know you spoke to the American Airlines recruiter, I think head of recruiting.
Yep.
Just give us an example, kind of tell us, what did you learn from that conversation, and what do you think, where's the value that people got out of it?
So Corey Glenn is the director of hiring at American Airlines, and he was my first big fish interview, like person that is responsible for a lot. And I was so nervous. And I was at the National Gay Pilots Association conference in Palm Springs, California. I think that's the name of the town. And we kind of worked it out to where he would, after the convention was over, he would give me some time to just ask questions. Man, I was so nervous because I wanted to ask a ton of questions, because people have these ideas. Each airline, whether it's American or Southwest or Delta or United or, Frontier or Spirit or whoever, everybody has their idea of what this company is like. And everybody also has their idea, especially right now, of like, well, they should hire me because I'm a pilot and they need pilots, and here I am. So the interview with Corey was great because we just sat down face to face with each other for almost 2 hours, I think. And he answered every single question. And we talked about, I asked him hard topics about the idea of people coming down on him one way or the other about hiring a lot of diverse people, or hiring only military people, or not hiring enough civilian people, or whatever the topic was that I was really uncomfortable about asking, to tell you the truth. And I mentioned when we were pre-gaming a little bit, I said, dude, I just want to ask you some really hard stuff. I'm really nervous about it. He said, dude, don't be nervous about it. Ask the question. Let me answer the question. And that is what that conversation with Corey just kind of put me at ease with everybody, because now I have this confidence that it's okay to dive into the weeds and ask hard things. And so I've been able to do that. And Corey handles everything with grace too. He's such a wonderful speaker. And so I've really enjoyed that. And you want to talk about lots of downloads, man, that I broke it up into 2 episodes. Holy moly. Every time I look, I cannot believe how many people listen to those episodes. And it's really helpful because he needs 2,000 pilots, even if age 67 pops, right? That's only slowing down retirements. That's not slowing down growth. And so he's pinched to find people, and that I've talked to him multiple times since, and it's been so helpful for him because they're getting better quality candidates that understand their culture better.
It's funny because the folks that I've talked to that have interviewed at American recently have really walked away impressed with the interview process and the way that American is, I don't know if the right word is selling American, right, to the interviewee, but they're like, wow, this is like really incredible. And I know for a lot of folks I've talked to that maybe didn't think American was at the top, and then after interviewing maybe at multiple airlines, they're like, wow, I really have to reconsider.
Well, how long ago was that first interview you were just talking about with Corey?
The Corey interview, I want to say, happened in February or March. I think that's when it was. And I bank a lot of my episodes. I have a lot of pre-recorded episodes that I've been working on, but I jumped quick to make sure that one could be released. So yeah, I think February or March.
Well, what I think would be interesting too is just to see the evolution of this as the market has changed so drastically. And obviously you weren't doing this podcast 5 years ago or whatever, but have you got a sense from the people you've talked to about how their recruiting efforts and what their, obviously the requirements on paper have dropped, right? They've all been reduced slowly. But how has that affected, how they hire and what they look for and how stringent they are on making sure it's the right fit for that culture of that company? And what's kind of your sense of all that?
Yeah. So there's a couple things. When I look at the requirements to be a pilot at a major airline, and you just take, American or Southwest or whoever, you have these brackets, and we need this amount of time. We need a college degree. We need a this, we need a that. And these are all levers that they can pull away that okay, we've gotten all the people that fall under this block. Now let's take a look at the people under this block and see if those people are suitable for being part of our airline. And so you see them starting to peel away different things as once you get through everybody, you get through everybody. If you need 3,000 hours of total time, there's only a bucket of people that have 3,000 hours of total time. And those people are not currently flight instructors. And those people are, those are people that are retired that are now looking for 135 jobs. Right. And so,
and the thing is that bucket is slowly getting refilled, right? As people fly, but unfortunately the hole in the bottom of the bucket is bigger than the refill. And so, like you said, they suck it down. All of a sudden it's like, okay, now we need, and it's a captain
refill. It's a captain refill that they need. And so it's really hard right now. If you are 500 hours or approaching your 1,500 hour time limit and you are looking to go to a regional, it's really, really tough right now because they don't need FOs. They're still fat on FOs. They've been fat on FOs for 8 months. But every time somebody gets close to that 1,000 hours of 121 time to upgrade, they're getting snatched up. And that's, it's ULCCs and regionals that are having that problem. The evolution of this is really fascinating to see, but, you asked about how does a company make sure somebody fits in with their culture? That's a question I love to ask because people that are recruiters only have about an hour to 2 hours to really understand who you are and what you stand for. And they have a list of questions that they have to ask. They can't go extemporaneously and just go down the rabbit hole with you. And so you mentioned how it's kind of a sales pitch about their company. They want you to feel at home with what they have to offer because they know now you have choices. 3 years ago, 4 years ago, you didn't have choices. You just went where you went and you were happy. And now, I've got people at every airline that are looking to go to every other airline because they live closer to one place or another, or they want a captain upgrade faster. And, that's, what's the value statement of each airline is whether it's regional US LCC or major or Part 135. I talked to a lot of them, and I've actually interviewed a company, and then it's been like 3-4 months since before I was getting ready to release the episode. I sent out the email like, "Hey, your episode's going out," and they're like, "Wait, things have changed. Let's delete this episode. Let's re-record. I want to do a new episode because we have a lot of things that have changed since we recorded."
It's funny you mentioned people chasing the captain upgrade at the majors. And when Max and I were flying at the regionals, 10, 12 years ago, that was a big thing. Oh, I got hired at American Eagle, but I'm going to switch over to SkyWest because their upgrade time's faster, and to now have that same thing happen at the majors, it's just interesting, but it just goes to show you this paradigm shift that everyone's had to adjust to, where it used to be take the first job you can get. And now the musical chairs are continuing and the shuffling continues.
Yeah, I'm sure you saw the articles that went out about United and their captain vacancies being pretty large, and that people are not bidding those. And that's happening at every airline that has junior captain slots. And can I talk about that for a minute? Because I think that people are wondering why in the world would you give up $300 an hour? And I can tell you that the reason people will give that up is because the quality of life, the ability to manage your schedule is more important to a lot of people than the number in their bank account, especially if you are under the age of probably 40 or 35. You've got a lot longer glide slope, and you've got a lot better opportunity to live the experiences, to go non-rev to Geneva or some craziness like that, than it is to be on reserve day in and day out and be bottom of the barrel for the foreseeable future. And that's interesting. Is tricky.
So I was sitting in the airport last week, and I was on a deadhead out of Nashville somewhere. And this United guy's like, hey, walks up, are you working the flight? No, I'm just deadheading. And he was commuting, and I was going to O'Hare. That's why I was deadheading to O'Hare, and he was going to work. Right. So we were sitting there talking to him for a while, and he's an old riddle dude, like from way before us and stuff, and the whole thing. But he would be bidding 60% as a captain. He's an FO on the 737, which is what he currently flies in Chicago. Right. And he's like, yeah, but he goes, that still is flying red eyes. And there was some other factor. I can't remember if it was like flying on weekends or whatever, but the thing is, even that far up, like that's, it still is such a drastic change in quality of life. Even bidding 60, he's not going to reserve. Like, dude, he is 60%, like way up there. And even still, he's like, I don't want to do that. And
yeah.
And I think that's the difference. And I think that a lot of the work rules in these contracts, especially in United's that are coming down the pike, is to help alleviate that. So that the change in quality of life, it's always going to be a hit in quality of life. That's just a seniority based system thing. But that the gap, the change, won't be quite as big. That's like at my airline. It's not. I don't think the gap is quite as big because you don't have all the different equipment types and all of this stuff. But even we're trying to make certain things on reserve even better, so that I think it narrows that quality of life gap. And I think that's an important thing, moving forward to fill these captain vacancies, is to not make it just such a total. And it'll be really interesting to see if they narrow that gap enough where people do then start to. Like at United's case, actually fill all of the vacancies. Like the fact that they have unfilled, like a lot of unfilled captain vacancies is pretty wild.
It's bananas. It is.
And so it'll be really interesting to see what happens though, when like everybody that's taken the upgrade now, and then if they make the work rules better, where then they start filling all the captain vacancies with the more senior people, how that paradigm shift, looks in the seniority.
Yeah, I think they'll alleviate it some, but based on the TA, and I don't see a massive uptick in that. Each airline has changed up how they're doing bids now and how they're forecasting, and also how they're training. If these new captain upgrades that have been on campus less than, I want to say it's like 24 months or 36 months, like the newer people that are coming through, they're actually giving them extended OE, and they're bringing them twice as long with a check airman to make sure that they are the companies. I feel like the companies are doing a great job of mitigating the risk, because that's what you've got to do. If you're getting somebody that qualifies on paper, that doesn't mean they qualify mentally. And I'm probably one of those people, but the capability level you've got to fill, and you've got to figure out a way to help them understand the administrative role and the leadership role of being a captain. And that's tricky. I talked to a guy at the company that I fly for the other day, who is a recent upgrade. He's been on campus about a year, and he's a great captain. I flew with him at a regional, and he was my captain, and he's awesome. And I was having this conversation with him about what it's like. And he said, my biggest fear, the hardest part is I'm afraid of the fact that people are going to see my seniority number and think I'm totally useless, and think that I'm not good enough at my job to be good at it. And so I don't know how to handle those people. And I told him, I said, first off, you are an awesome dude, and you're an amazing captain, and I've seen you do it. So go with humility, but go with confidence, and know that you can do this. It's just a matter of how you handle yourself and your self-awareness, because the people, I've seen it both sides, man. I've seen people with a chip on their shoulder, like, yeah, man, I'm a captain. And I've seen other people and I just want to punch them in the teeth. And then the other side of that category is, hey, I'm here to learn. I'm here for you to make me better and us to make each other better. And so I would appreciate any feedback you can give me. And if I'm messing something up, let me know, because we need to fix it, and let's just be safe. And that's the position, man. Empathy and humility and learning. That's what's up.
I actually would push back on that and say it's better just to fake it until you can make it as a captain. That seems,
I've heard that somewhere.
Did you hear that one?
I heard that. I was driving in California when I heard that. I almost ran off the road.
What? But
Max, your reaction was awesome. You're like, what the hell are you talking about, bro?
I'm like, what did we just talk about for the last 10 minutes?
full send, bro.
Fake it till you make it. It's freaking good. Dude, it was interesting. Just the other day, I was flying on I haven't flown on a regional airliner in quite some time. I just haven't. I haven't had the need to. And I flew on JSX the other day with me and my 3 children.
Yes.
We're sitting in the back of the airplane. We're bored, and they shut the door, and I start to start up the engines. And I thought something I never thought, really, sitting in the back of an airliner. I'm like, I wonder who's flying this thing right now. Like, I wonder how, like, what sort of experience level we're at, because, obviously for those of you that don't know, they operate under 135, so they don't have to meet all of the 121 requirements. Right. And I'm like, it's either like a retired airline pilot, like that's like 66 or 7 or 8 or who knows, or in the FO. I was just going through the whole thing in my head. I'm like, huh. And I just put my whole family on here, and I have like no clue. And that's something that you never really, that's never really entered my mind, flying on anyone else, including the regional airlines or anybody till now. And I was
there goes our JSX sponsorship we're working on right now, Max. Come on.
Hold on. Let me just tell you, I love JSX. Todd Kenning's director of hiring over there, and he's a cool guy. And they have a really great, they have a cool business model, which other airlines are pushing back against because they say it's not 135, but it is. And this trickiness there, it's mostly older captains over there. But the trick that you have in the 135, just like you guys always talk about, Dylan, is that insurance cost of employing a younger captain, and you just like, there's just a barrier to entry. But dude, if you get a chance to go fly JSX and go sit in a 145 with like half as many seats, it's like 20 something seats, right?
Dude,
it's amazing.
That's like, I think it's, I want to say 30 in a 145. It's a great product, dude. And I was going, so we were going to Denver but we're going to the mountains. So I'm like, and Dylan is actually the one that he goes, yeah, they fly to, cause they don't fly a ton of places out of Phoenix, but one of the places they fly is BJC. And I'm like, it's a little closer, but dude, so much less hassle. It's unbelievable.
Yeah.
And it was funny because the product is awesome. And I'm sitting next to my 8-year-old in the back, and he's got his iPad, and he's like, oh, there's Starlink on here. And he's like, did you pay for that? And I'm like, no, it comes. And he's like, they got great snacks and and the whole thing. So he goes, what's this place called? And I see him open up, maps, and I said, it's called JSX. So he types in JSX, and it, comes up and puts the pin. He goes, Dad, how do I leave a review on here?
Your 8-year-old said this?
My 8-year-old was so compelled by the product that he was ready to leave a review.
That's so good.
And I was like, dude, what are you going to say?
I love that your 8-year-old knows there are reviews. That's amazing.
That's the other thing. Yeah.
Did he leave one on the podcast?
All of them.
No, he doesn't. Actually, he's the only one that asked to listen to it, believe it or not.
We just pay children to write reviews for us.
I think he just listens to it because he likes to hear Dylan.
My daughter does the intro on my podcast, and she's like, do people listen? And so I was at Women in Aviation, and every single person came up and was like, I love your daughter's voice. So actually the only bad review I've ever gotten on my podcast was somebody saying they didn't like my daughter's voice. What's up with that? Totally lame. I know. That was harsh.
Nick, then you should interview a retired drug smuggling pilot.
Yeah, you'll get a lot of negative
on your way.
I loved every single part of that. And I was like, I'll go do it. Let's go. Like,
makes you think.
Cortez, here I go, baby.
Yeah.
See you, U.S. Navy.
Okay, so I want to get back to this early captain upgrade stuff. You're working with clients doing the career coaching stuff. How do you help them figure that out. If you're talking to somebody that's at Delta or United and they're like, I could take Kennedy, for narrow body captain right now. And maybe they don't even know, maybe they're military. They never were at the regionals. They can't grasp this. Like, what is the process that you walk people through to help figure out if they should do it or not?
Yeah, so I have two buckets of people. The first bucket is the person that came from some other airline. The second bucket is somebody that came from the military, whether it's some person flying KC-130s or somebody else that was like, I've had Blue Angels and astronauts and those kind of things too. So the question becomes, where are you in your experience level? Have you been at a regional airline for however many years and you've banged out a ton of 121 hours? Or are you a military person coming through with, maybe you can get a 500-hour buffer based on a multi-engine, multi-crew, fixed-wing airplane requirement, or maybe you have to get your whole 1,000 hours. So first off, I have to balance people's expectations, because if you need 1,000 hours of 121 time and you are at a major, you're talking a couple and a half years of flying a lot before you're actually like crossing that line. But if you just came from Envoy or Endeavor or PSA or whoever, and you've got your 1,000 hours, like, yeah, you're up next if you want to do it. And so then we have that conversation about, where are you in your life? Yeah, you can do it and you can be successful at it, but do you want to do it? The money is one thing, but where do you, first off, if you're going to commute, listen, I just moved my family from Monterey, California to my home base because you guys told me don't commute. And I would say, I agree with you wholeheartedly, because if you're going to be a junior captain, if you're going to be the bottom dude or dudette on the totem pole, and you're going to be flying the red eyes and you're living out of base, especially if you're a time zone away, you are never, ever going to be home, and you're going to be just so beat for the foreseeable future. Like it's going to be years of you having early starts and late finishes. And that is tricky, because if you're listening to this and you're like, why is that tricky? It doesn't sound that bad. Well, if you live in Pensacola, Florida, and you have to commute to Atlanta, the first flight leaves at 6 a.m. Well, that's 7 a.m. Atlanta time. They've already been flying for an hour and a half. So you've got to leave the day before to get to Atlanta. And then once you're in Atlanta, you've got to find a crash pad that you've got to pay for. You've got to spend the night. You've got to figure out your way to the airport. And so there you are. Maybe you got in late and you have an early start and you don't get good rest. And then you're like, am I fatigued? Am I not? And then you get home and you land at 8 p.m. and there's one last flight, but it's full. And then you have to go back to your crash pad and you don't get to see your wife and your family the next day. And here you are with 17 days off, but you really are only home for 7 of those days. And that's the reality of it. And anybody that spent time in the, 4 years prior in a regional airline knows that pain. So it sucks, and I don't recommend it. It's not worth the money. It is not worth the money. It's not. And so F it, just freaking go and be an FO and be 55% and pick your schedule and drop trips and pick up overtime and fly time and a half and love it and see your kids and spend that extra money at Disney World. That's what I would do.
And clearly that's what everybody's
Good
doing.
Advice.
Yeah,
I know.
And we're seeing like,
what's funny is it's even making its way. I read an article on Apple News, like in mainstream news, about pilots bypassing upgrade because, the airlines having a struggle getting captains and trying to explain it in layman's terms. It was actually kind of funny to be like, oh.
Yeah, I would like to get Ted's take on it. I would like you guys to call Ted.
Yeah, Ted is a huge proponent of commuting. My favorite thing to give Ted, I love pilots that commute from a base of another major airline. They live in a base, yet do not work for that airline, and then commute to another base for another airline. That's the question we asked the other day, Nick. Here's the question. Right now, today's world, how many years of seniority do you give up? So say you live in Salt Lake, right? And you commute to Dallas for American.
Okay.
And how many years of seniority do you give up if you could get a job at Delta and then have the opportunity to be based where you live?
I have one of those. I have a person that's at a major airline that's year 12 that's switching to another one. And
There's your sign right
My
there.
God.
That's about all you need to know about commuting right there.
yeah.
Dude, 12?
Yeah. It's amazing and I can't go into it, but I can tell you, okay, so that's
And
a
can
really
you
good
get
question.
him on our show like some of those other guests? Can we talk to this guy?
You may know him. So I would say this is case dependent on what your life goals are and where you are in your career. Because if you're younger, then it makes sense to make that jump. But I also would say, if you're going to make that jump, then you need to be happy with your own choices and you can't look back and you can't be disgruntled about it. You need to be you need to put on your big girl pants and be able to be satisfied with the fact that you took a risk, because it is straight up gambling. It is rolling the dice in Vegas, and maybe you're going to win, maybe you're not going to win. And if you don't, you can't be upset about it. It's your own choice, and it just has to be in the past. I've seen people at year 2, year 3, year 4 deciding that they're going to jump, and they're never going to have that seniority that they once had. And really, the advantages of seniority come in basically windows of that, like, hey, I'm below 80%. Hey, I'm between 80% and 60%. Those are kind of when the bids come out. Those are kind of the basic windows of when it's good to have it. But if you're a top 30 or 40%, then it's tricky. Well, it's actually double tricky, because top 30 or 40% probably got hired 24 months ago. So just go, man.
Tricky.
Go and never. Here's the key, though.
It's-
You can't ever look at like what happened at the airline you left at and be like, oh, if I would have stayed, I'd have been 777. Like, you can't.
Well, that's what I was going to say.
You have to be able to just put blinders on, like you said, and just have the confidence in your choice.
Well,
Yeah.
that's not realistic. Like, you're not going to just be like, filter
Yeah.
all the news out about whatever the airline. But the reality, when you said it's kind of like Vegas and rolling the dice, it made me think of saying, I think the airlines is very, very, very similar to sports gambling.
Mm-hmm.
Because you know what's happened in the past, right? You can look and see, and you have the information today, but the future is very unpredictable, as in sports gambling. That's why it's
Gambling.
it's gambling is the unpredictability of it. And that's what the airlines are. You all you can know is the past. You know what's happening right now, but the future is always who knows what,
Yeah,
And as we saw, things change so quick, and people hire till they fire, and it's just it's wild. Like, it's just unbelievable to think of a business where they have classes full of new pilots, and then they just come in and be like, all right, you guys go home. We're done. We're furloughing.
Hire until you
Like,
furlough.
the definition of a 180. I mean, it's unbelievable. So,
my life experience is that I was a military person. I flew in the military. I was a helicopter guy, and then I owned a business, and I decided to get into flying based on everybody telling me like, oh, the airlines are hiring. So I went to the regional, and I thought, I had this chip on my shoulder. I'm only going to be here 2 years. I'm going to be good, and then I'm going to make it. Well, I get to the airline. The first thing I do is I'm on reserve for like 8 months. I don't fly. Then I start flying for a year, and I thought I'm doing great. Then I got deployed to Africa for 1 year, had a baby born while I was there, and came home to a 1-year-old. And then I thought, all right, I'm back. I'm home. I'm going to start flying. I'm going to get hired by my major. I'm ready to crush it. And then COVID. And so you don't know I was in such bad shape when COVID hit, man. I was so upset because I was like, I should be at a major. I don't deserve. And I was talking to a former vice president at American Airlines who told me, pull your head out of your ass, just freaking suck it up And this too shall pass, man. Just keep moving forward and stop being such a whiner. And that set me straight. And ever since then, I was like, all right, well, you can't look in the past. You can only look forward.
So true. And the amount of, so we've been flying for professionally since just after 2000, and all of the crazy black swan events that have happened, it just seems like they're accelerating, right? Like there's more and more of them. And I was talking with somebody yesterday, and I'm like, and we were talking about like, wow, things are pretty good for a lot of professional pilots right now. Imagine if a few of these other crazy things hadn't happened, how much better they'd even be. But that's not a realistic thing to think, because in this business, there are always just going to be setbacks. There is going to be those unexpected, those flutes could play.
I make my kids march around the house.
Those flutes are out there, and there's just always something that is unexpected. And when you make that gamble, that is the real risk. You're at a 12 years on a seniority list. You're going to start over again and go to the bottom. That's probably really the biggest exposure you have, right? Is that now you have lost a lot of that protection from the flute. So there's a lot of considerations.
Yeah, and you start making yourself responsible for other people's lives and well-being, and it only complicates things. I can't tell you how much of a weight that puts on your shoulders once you start having more people.
In your case, 6 people, depending on you. I think it would be, we heard your wife's perspective on this, but can you share for maybe some folks what it is like to have kids and be a professional pilot, and kind of some of the weight that you have to take on?
Yeah, your spouse makes it or breaks it. And I can only speak from the perspective of a married person whose spouse takes care of the kids, right? So Anna spends all of her time and all of her effort being an amazing human, and I'm very thankful for her and that she's able to manage that. My kids love my job because my wife tells them to love my job, and that she is positive about it and she's encouraging about it. And if she were not, then there would be this unbearable tension where it would make the trips so much harder. And so you have to know yourself, and you have to know your family dynamic on whether or not that's a good idea. But also they love it. I'm home for 4, 5, 6 days in a row, and I can hang out, and we go on mountain bike rides, and we go on life adventures and stuff like that. I just had my oldest do an unaccompanied minor trip. It was his first trip by himself, and man, just the excitement on his face. He had some gummy bears and a Sprite in his pocket when he came back. He was on cloud 9. So that's, that benefit and that goodness is awesome. I've also had conversations with people whose both spouses are pilots, and it gets to be tricky, but you try to manage that with childcare, and it takes a village in that kind of case, because you have to have your community around you because when weather comes in and you're both flying, all of a sudden, what about -3 and -4 and all these littles running around? You've got to manage that. So your mileage may vary, but love your spouse, because if you do, there's a better chance that they're going to appreciate flying more than not appreciate it.
That is well said. I've never heard someone phrase it exactly that way, where like your spouse has to love your job. But in a way, it is true. I mean,
it's so true, because you cannot do it by yourself.
Yeah.
There's virtual impossibility to raise children and be an airline pilot or any pilot by yourself.
And
you have to have that support.
Yeah. It doesn't matter how many boats you've got. Doesn't matter.
That's right. Okay, Nick, I'm going to shift gears a little bit here. Let's go to some current events.
Let's go.
Age 67, or age 67 and 60 or 364 days, or whatever you want to call it. Age 68 is looming potentially. It's at the time of this recording, it's the end of July. It is going through Congress right now. We don't know what's going to happen.
It is,
but. Have you and your team kind of thought about what the ramifications could be? Are you talking to your clients about what could happen? What are your thoughts right now? Are you in any social media groups tracking this?
All of them, yes. Anything that's full of vitriol, I'm a big fan of. So the forums, the books of faces, the grams, all of those things. Some companies don't allow TikTok anymore, so that's a spicy one. But I would say age 67 is really tricky. And it's not age 65. If people for a little look back, right? It used to be age 60 that you had to retire, and all of that came about in the late 1950s with Major General C.R. Smith. C.R. Smith was the dude that ran. If you go to the C.R. Smith Museum,
that's American's museum, Airlines,
right? That's right.
Yeah.
So he ran American. In the 1950s. And so they established this age 60 retirement age. And the reason they established that is because they wanted to get it used to be like, hey, type rating at age 55, retire by 60. And the reason is because they wanted younger pilots that could learn new jets faster in there and be more dynamic. And that is where the push initially started. Fast forward to post bankruptcies, you've got everybody declaring bankruptcy. Everybody used to have a pension, and now these pensions are gone, except for FedEx and UPS, right? And you have these men and women that have been flying their entire career, planning their financial future on these pensions, and now they're gone and they don't exist. And so one of the things that this pilot shortage was starting to loom because lots of people were pushing towards age 60, and then they push age 65 and it gets approved by Congress, and they slid that. One of the conversation pieces they had is like, hey, the reason we'll do this is to allow pilots to make up some money, some savings over these 5 years. And, I'm sure somebody's throwing darts at me listening like, no, this is all this other thing and that. But, it's generally that's what happened. Now here we are with this continued pilot shortage, and age 67 isn't going to really. It's gonna throttle back slightly, but all that does is reduce retirements for 24 months. There's a lot of conversation about how we talked about earlier, like how many of those people approaching age 65 are on long-term disability or something where they're not actually flying, they're just getting paid. So there's a portion of people doing that, but there's also go ahead.
I'll stop you right there just for one sec, because I did read a news article that quantified that, which gives you some numbers. I mean, it says right here that per Scott Kirby in an interview with MSNBC, 36% of United Airlines 64-year-old pilots were out on short-term or long-term leave, and the president of APA at American says that 1 in 3 near age 65 on long-term sick or disability. So, a third, essentially.
Did that interview take place when Scott Kirby was on his private jet flying out of Newark?
I was flying that airplane. Come on.
It didn't specify.
That's awesome. I wish you were, man. That would have been amazing. So a third, that's significant. So you have that bucket of people who are on disability. You also have another bucket of people who actually need the money. And you have another bucket of people who kind of don't need the money, but are happy to fly and want to keep doing it. And so like whether I'm forward or against it doesn't really matter. If it happens, here's what I think it'll look like. I think it'll look like, Corey Glenn and Justin Ritter and Eric Hendrick and the directors of hiring at all the major airlines are going to go from 2,000 or 1,500 pilots required down to like 1,800 or 1,700. It'll reduce that. But the pilot hiring isn't just to stave off retirements. It's also to grow. You look at the seniority list at United, it's like 16,000 people. Same thing at Delta, and everybody's growing, and American's bigger than anybody. So you've got this growth that they've got orders for aircraft. They've got all sorts of things. They've still got to hit those numbers. So they've still got to hire, and it might temper it, but people are being smarter about hiring right now, and they're trying to use more long-term strategies, even if they're taking an initial loss, because they got 16% margins. Everybody's got a 16% margin, so you can have a few extra pilots and be fat on pilots and still manage it for the future. Because if the worst thing you can do is be caught flat-footed and have this huge amount of growth and then not enough pilots to fly it, i.e. every summer we've had in the past 3 years. So if you can get on the other side of that coin as a director of hiring, that would be the position where I would sit with the leadership team of my organization and lay it out like that. So that's what I see.
It's so interesting, the age 67 legislation, because everybody that it matters to seems to be like against it. Like all the pilot unions and everybody, but I just get the sense, I get the feeling that it's just kind of being rammed down everybody's throats. And I'm trying to figure out
who's advocating for this,
who's spending the money to lobby for this, or what's the real impetus for this push.
There's a big group of people that are pushing for it, that are senior pilots, clearly, that want to do it, are pushing hard, and they're putting their money where their mouth is, and they're going on Capitol Hill, and they're lobbying, and they're talking to lawmakers, and they're also going down to K Street and sitting down with the lobbying groups and employing them to lobby on their behalf, and they're putting real money behind it. And so there are lots of reasons that the companies don't want to do it, primarily to reduce that number of people that they're paying at the top of the pay scale and that they're paying disability for, on that side of the coin. On the union side of the coin, you've got, it's going to stifle growth and reduce the income for that airline, or for the union. But also, my union friends are probably hate me for saying that, but the fact of the matter is they've got a position that they've established, and they're pushing hard to it. And it doesn't take much to see them pushing hard and leaning forward in it. And so it's an interesting dynamic when you have one big pilot group pushing in different directions. And so it's fascinating to see.
The other thing that's lost is that, we have at the big legacy airlines all of these training events that are happening because of all of the movement, right? Mm-hmm. That's upward movement. All of a sudden, then you have all of the pilots that are nearing age 65 right now, that you'd have to assume a lot of those are on wide body airplanes that we have to assume primarily fly international, right? Well, all of a sudden that runs head to head with ICAO's rule that dictates international flying in excess of age 65. And so now you have everybody upgrading, and then now you have a stream that's right next to it going the other direction and downgrading people to domestic narrow body or whatever they're going to do. Or pilots that all of a sudden, I could only fly the Miami to Chicago leg on the 777.
Yeah.
It's like, what do you do? Which then is very costly, right? And so and the longevity of the pilot after that training event is up in the air. Well, it's less. The forecast is less of those pilots because they have a higher propensity of going on disability or losing their medical. That's just the way it is as you get older. I mean, it's just.
Yeah, I would also say that ICAO, I think, also used to be 60 and then switched to 65. And so that, I don't know the specifics behind that, but yes, you're right. The idea, if ICAO doesn't change their rules, then you would have to have this unbelievable switch and churn and all that. It's still an uphill battle. The 67 thing is still an uphill battle. So it'll be interesting to see how it pans out. And maybe there'll be a huge glut of Airbus 350 and 777 left seat spots instead
and here's the other thing too. So what this says is that the U.S. increases pilot retirement age to 65, but that aligned them with ICAO's pre-existing age 65 policy. And other countries such as Japan and Australia have retirement ages higher than 65, of which ICAO did not adjust its policy to accommodate. So
I have a feeling we can exert more influence than other people on ICAO. I'm just going to throw that out there right now.
Yeah, I agree for sure.
Yeah.
But
yeah, that's exactly.
Yeah.
Here's what no one is talking about that I have heard. Maybe you've seen this on all of your social media patrols, Nick. 65. Okay. I don't know if anyone's done a study yet, but Max just said the numbers basically are a third of pilots, kind of in that age 65 range are out, right? They can't do it. What physical toll on your body are you going to exert if you actually did fly till you're almost 68? Because this picture in my mind is I've got this massive retirement account that's going up. I've got all this money coming in. I'm very incentivized to stay until I'm at the very end because I'm making the most money. I get the best schedule. But at the same time, as this account is going up, I'm taking something out of my physical being to fly those last few years. And it's like we're doing this trade-off of taking, I would almost say, like life expectancy away to increase this retirement account. I want to know, for airline pilots that have flown their entire careers up to 65, what is their average life expectancy after they hit 65? You have $5 million of retirement in the bank. Do you have 3 years to use it? You know what I mean? And then if it's 67, are you going to cut another 6 months off your life? Like, what is the actual cost of doing that?
And I'll tell you what, the cost has never been higher because right now with the shortage of pilots, everybody's schedule is packed with more flying. Everybody's worked. I mean, I know my trips are like at the end of just recently, I've been like, dude, these are grinder trips. Like you're hustling, you're making a lot of money doing it, but it is hard. And
so if you're the senior guy or gal on flying the wide body for your company, you're probably doing 2 trips a month. And so you're chilling and you're just hanging out and you're sleeping most of the time. So I would say that, I mean, first off, I want to say 2 things. Number 1, there are plenty of people who I would like to see fly towards age 67 if that's going to reduce their lifespan.
Shout out.
That's thing number 1. Thing number 2 is if you're sitting on $5 million, let's talk to the person that's listening, right? Because the person that's approaching age 67 is probably not listening. The person that's 25 or 35 or 45 is the person that's listening to this podcast right now. And I want you to know that you need to pick up the phone and call Timothy P. Pope, and you need to come up with a game plan because seriously, hand to God, man, like call Tim and talk to him. He will tell you your number. And when you hit your number, get the hell out. Go, because you do not need the extra money. When you hit your number, get out and go live your life and burn it down because it's going to be awesome. And that's where you need to be.
That is well said.
Yeah, that is a very, very hard thing for people to wrap their heads around. Even the 60-something-year-old guy or gal that's in that position now and that knows they're like, wait a minute, but that's an extra over $1 million if I stay here and fly. And this is not that hard and blah, 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 blah. But dude,
I've already got all the stuff. I don't have a boat and I don't have a Ferrari, but I've got the stuff. I've got all the stuff. I don't want the stuff. I want the life. I want the experience. I want to go out and see it. There's a list of places I've never been, and there's a list of things I haven't done with my family yet. And I want to do that. At the end of the day, I want my kids to be able to look back and be like, I had an awesome childhood. I love my parents. And like, I don't want my kids to be like, I had to wash my dad's Ferrari every weekend. Like who cares?
Yeah. And that's the thing is there's a trade-off for health for wealth at some point with your physical health and also the health of your family and everything else. But if you grind it that long, I don't know.
Here's what I'm hoping is pilots passing each other in the terminal and in the jet bridge will be like, hey, what's your Pope number? I'm almost to my Pope number.
Yeah, that's right.
And the NEC contributions are just going up. Like, why do we need to work longer?
Yeah, exactly.
Like, what are we doing? And the funny thing is, it's like you cannot make the case. Look around the rest of the world to see what sort of company contribution that anybody gets to their 401k. And then you look at airline pilots. It's like, what?
Yeah. I mean, 18, 20%. And
I know.
you should, and it's well deserved because it used to be a pension, right? But now it's an 18% 401k. But I love seeing it grow. I love logging into my account, seeing where I am, and like being thankful that because I spent a lot of years working at other companies, non-flying jobs that did very little, like 3% match. And, I was making like no money. And so now it's sitting there watching it grow, thinking about like the safety net. You got to do it, man.
Yeah, that's a balance.
Yeah, but everybody that's really worked up about it, just realize even if it does change, it's a small little bump in a long road. Like it's not that big of a deal.
It's not COVID. That's for damn sure.
Yeah, exactly. And even COVID, if you look over the history, there's a lot of guys that flew through what they call the lost decade, folks. That's where like nothing happened for 10 years. Like nobody moved seniority. Like it was stagnant for 10 years. And everyone's like, oh, COVID. Oh, that was nothing.
Nothing. It was short.
So
my first day of flight school in the Navy was on September 11th, 2001. And
exactly.
I'm really glad I had a job.
I hate to be the doom and gloom guy, but I swear we've got to be due for.
It's almost been 2 years.
Another lost decade.
Something up in the next. I don't say it's going to be tomorrow or the next day, but at some point,
nuclear war.
Someone's going to pull the emergency brake on the train here.
Yeah, we already can't fly to China because of the Russian airspace.
Let's take a quick break from our chat with Nick to talk about our other friend, our mutual friend, Timothy P. Pope. When it comes to financial planning, he has got your back, so you can focus on the mission ahead. Timothy P. Pope is a certified financial planner helping professional pilots design and execute smart financial planning strategies from retirement planning and investment management to military transition and tax planning. He is your financial planning partner. Timothy P. Pope, certified financial planner helping professional pilots make the most out of life. And now we've just learned that there's a Timothy P. Pope number you need to figure out for your retirement. Check out the show notes to get all the information. Okay, back to our conversation with Nick. All right, so you mentioned your career coaching side. Somehow between all of these episodes of podcasting, you're actually helping folks get jobs, their dream jobs, hopefully. And it sounds like with your military background, you work with a lot of military folks. You're probably also working with a lot of folks that are maybe just getting their career started. So I imagine it's two different ends of the spectrum. Can you talk a little bit about the low time folks right now and who you're helping, and how do you coach someone with very little experience to get a job with probably a very high stakes training event right in the beginning?
I know. And so the first thing I like to tell people is, first off, if you are listening to this podcast, if you're listening to my podcast, if you're listening to anything having to do with aviation, and you are it seems like it's a big, scary thing, and there's a lot of different ways it could be. You could go left or right, or what do I do? How do I do it? Reach out. We will talk to you. Dylan, how long have we been texting each other, Dylan? Like on LinkedIn? Years, right? This is our first time actually like linking up and chatting in person, but certainly reach out and be that person that asks the question. I mean, every time I check my email or my LinkedIn or whatever, there's a jillion people that have a question, and I get a lot of show ideas from that stuff. But for those low time pilots that are out there, I think that you got to think of a couple things. First off, you've got to go 110% from the start, because since it's such a quick turn, if you fail an event, it brings that failure event to the time that you interview is so much closer than it used to be. And so, it's not the end of the world, and they call it stubbing your toes. So be able to recover if you do. Be able to lean forward and make sure that You are a person that can succeed and move on and put it behind you. I think of that when I'm in the simulator and I'm doing a single engine hand flown approach and I'm trying to land it and I bungle it up and I have to do a go around. That I got to put it behind me. I've got to move forward and and not let the next one bother me, because if you do, that sine wave gets bigger and bigger. The second thing is keep getting your hours through flight school and always think about the next thing. You need to expand your network. You need to get out there, join the groups that are hiring low time people, see where you can fit in that puzzle. If it's going to be CFI or if it's going to be flying like pipeline stuff or survey or whatever it is. There's a lot of different ways you can do that. And sometimes it can be tricky making that jump up from 250 to 500 and then 500 to 1500. But the people that are creative are the people that can win. The people that, I've heard that flexibility is the key to air power. And if you are able to be flexible and to move around and to not, if you live in Montana, you've only got a certain amount of options. But if you zoom out, then you are going to have a lot more opportunity, and you need to go and be forward and contact people and hit them up and get in their face and get in front of them and tell them that you're hungry. And as you go through, decide whether or not you want to be in business aviation, if you want to be in the Part 121 world, whatever that looks like. Find a place where you can grow and get involved. Get involved. It's never too early to start getting with an organization like OBAP or NGPA or WAI or, RTAG. And there's lots and lots and lots of groups out there, Sisters of the Sky, PPOT. Everybody at LPA and Popper, everybody. I want to make sure I talk to all of them, because there's a group for you, and those groups can help you find jobs. They're full of professional pilots on every side of the spectrum, and they will help you get to where you want to be. Even if you don't look or sound or act like those people, do be part of their lives and get out there and love on them, let them love on you, and let them help you as you help them. And you're going to establish a lifelong friendship with a group that will help you for your entire career. So get out there, get involved with a group. Everybody has outreach, and they want to hear from you as much as you need them. So do it. And that's kind of how you get the game going.
Yeah, that's well said.
Good advice.
And for the military folks, I imagine you work with some of those.
Get a haircut, let it grow out, get rid of the mustache.
All right.
All right, military folks, right? I've got a couple buckets of you. I have my prior enlisted or my non-flyers that were officers, warrant officers, that kind of stuff. You guys need to get smart. Join the RTAG group. First off, everybody, you guys need to get smart on what kind of GI Bill you have, how much tuition assistance stuff you can get, who accepts what. It doesn't take much to look at which flight schools will screw a military person and take all their VA money and not help them. And there are other ones that really lean forward and really help you grow well and help you get your quals that you need. It can be pretty quick, so you got to come ready to party. The helicopter guys and gals, if you're Navy or Air Force and you've got some T6 time, some fixed wing time or C-12 time or whatever it is, you stand a good chance as long as you're flying. If you've got some multi-engine hours of getting on with a major, as long as you're current, you need to get in front of them at the conferences, and you need to bring your resume, and you need to be ready to rock. And then for my heavy guys and gals and my fighter guys and gals, I need you guys to chill out. I need you guys to chill out. I need you to have a great attitude. I need you to be focused. You don't deserve this job, and you're lucky to have the wings on your chest. And so I want you to come with humility, because that is the thing that I don't see these days from my military boys and girls. That ability to be humble and honest and not sound like a jerk God, it is so hard. It is so hard. So you're owed nothing. You're owed 0%. It is 100% up to you to prove that you deserve to be there because you are a great person. And you like, who cares if you're a great aviator? So are the other people. And like Americans sent home 60% of their interviewers the other day because they had bad attitudes and like felt like they owed it. Like, go on, man, get out of here. Like, give me a call, spitfirelead.com. I'll sort you out and I'll give you the hard truth. But like, I do want my military folks to know that they have as much of an uphill battle. And then for my civilian folks, like those military guys and gals aren't going to trump you. Okay. They are not going to surpass you on, because you have awesome skills that are well deserved to be at the majors as well. So it's tricky. Military people listen to the podcast. I need you gotta take notes. Gotta take notes.
Call Nick, take a deep breath.
Chill.
We'll have the
I
link
like that.
for Nick's information in the show notes so you can calmly call him, humbly request his help. It'll be good practice.
This is the only time. That's the only way the military guys will listen. Like when I like come at them with a knife hand, they're like, okay, I got it. Roger that.
I like that. I haven't heard that before. Okay. Nick, before you go, we got to get a good story out of you. I know you've got a lot. I mean, you already told us the story of your knighthood. I mean, I don't know where we go from there, but I'm excited to find out.
Oh my gosh. Oh man. All right. So I was on a 3-day. I was flying an Airbus and I was on this 3-day with this captain and I was relatively new. And the guy, I'm the kind of person that I just want to know your story. I want to start off a great conversation. I want us to have a cool relationship because really I'm looking for a friend. I'm looking because I have no friends. So I am hoping that when we sit down together that we can have a really cool relationship. And I still talk to, I talk to so many captains that I have flown with because I love their stories. I want to hear them. So I'm sitting down and this guy gets in and, he's later on in his career. And so I introduce myself, he introduces himself and he sits down and he reaches into his bag. He gets his headset out, plugs it in. He gets out a pencil and then he gets out this metal ruler. He sets it down. And he gets the release, it's a paper release, and he starts putting the ruler down in straight line tearing, like different, he sections it off into like 11 sections. I'm like, oh God, what am I going to do with all these sections? And so, he's doing all this stuff, making small talk. I'm programming the box. I asked him like, hey, what's your background? He's like, oh, it's Army. And I said, oh, okay. What'd you do in the Army? And he says, all I can tell you is my favorite letter is C and my favorite number is 4. And I was like, what? What the hell does that mean? And like, he wouldn't explain himself. And he's just like, he's trying to like leave this mystery. Anyway.
Does it mean he's a Chinook guy?
No, that's a C-46, like 47. Like,
well, it's got a C and a 4.
C and a 4. I think he wants me to think he's EOD is what I think he wants me to think.
Oh.
And so, but I don't because he's just not that guy. Because those guys
Did you check, see how many fingers he had?
I smelled his hand to see if it smelled like, smelled like C4 and all the other primers. But so anyway, we're like, he's already got this really rough attitude. We're taxiing out. And one of the things I do when we're taxiing, one of my biggest fears in life is making a wrong turn on a major airport's runway or taxiways. And so I'm like, hey, we're on Bravo. Charlie's coming up, right turn on Kilo, blah, blah, blah. And so we're doing that. We're making our way to the runway and I'm like, left turn on Lima. He stops the plane. He puts on the parking brake and he looks over at me and he says, hey, I've been taxiing this plane for 22 years. I've been flying at this airport for 32 years. I think I know where I'm going. You don't need to tell me which way to turn. And, I'm like, ugh. And CRM is totally crushed at this moment.
First leg, right?
First leg, first day, Mr. C4, and he's shut me down. Like, I used to be a CRM instructor. Like, I am the guy that can, like, deal with all this. And I was like, this jerk. He just totally, like, I was like, this 3-day is now silent. And And I'm like, Roger that, you got it. And so he takes off the parking brake and starts going forward again and immediately takes a wrong turn. First turn out.
Yes.
Yes. And I was like, hell yes. It was like the best day of my life. And
Oh my God,
like,
please tell me you let him
I didn't even
answer the
say
radio.
anything. We sat there,
Yes.
ground
Perfect.
called, and I was like, oh, sorry, ground, we'll make that turn again. I look over at him. He didn't look at me. It was a miserable 3-day. So if I can
I
get
would have
through
been
that-
like, you might want to get that radio call there,
yeah,
Captain.
Hey, I think that one's for you.
That one's for you.
So yeah, that was that was like my one of 2 bad experiences I've had in 6 years of 121 operations.
I've had similar experience. Have you had any like that, Max? Where you're like, hey, just trying to help here, and they shut you down, and then they screw up.
Not at my current place of employment. I have not,
So-
fortunately. Not that they're not out
So,
there,
Nick,
but
for the kids that are listening,
Yo,
and may have gotten into a situation like that, what do you do next? How do you make it through the rest of that trip?
yeah, that's a really good question. And you've really got to die to self, because the whole idea for a first officer is to support the captain and to be a safe pilot. And so there was no conversation. There was no chit chatting. It was just too hard to get over that hill. He had a wall, I had a wall, and it was really difficult. The things I was sure to do was be a good first officer, make sure I got all the I was pilot monitoring that flight. I made sure that the box was good. Like, I made myself extra good, and I didn't learn anything that trip except for like, I certainly don't want to fly with that guy again. But I'm also the guy that I don't have a list of like people I won't fly with. I don't care how mean the guy is or bad the girl is, or like how we're different politically or whatever, because I'm actually not political, so it makes it easy for me. But you're gonna have a lot of time in a lot of flight decks where people are going to talk about things opposite of what you are all about. And it's either, it might be politics, it might be religion, it might be the company, it might be the union, it might be the contract. All you got to do is watch those Lego living the dream things, and it's true. And you just so make the best of it and grow where you're planted, I think is the moral.
I think so. And there's going to be hard trips, and you're just going to have to sit there, and it's part of being a pro. You've got to sit there and still be the best first officer you can be, even though if your ego's bruised or the communication is tough. And that's a skill that you learn, and that is part of the job.
Yeah.
yeah. And you also have to always remember, it's not always the captain's fault. Maybe sometimes take a look at yourself too. And because I've flown with people that are like, oh, I would never fly with this guy again. Blah, blah. I'm like, oh, really? What's his name? And they'll say it. I'm like, I flew with him a few weeks ago. We got along fine. Like, I don't know. That was weird.
Yeah.
I didn't see that coming. So, a lot of times it's,
And then that guy goes, I'm putting you on my no-fly list too,
across the pedestal.
Oh, you guys fly?
Yeah.
You're out.
Well,
Never
for the captains out there too, you have to be introspective. Like, you may be in charge, but there's a reason there's 2 pilots there. It's not so it's so that you can be a team together. And that is a really hard thing to think about if you've been doing it for decades. And so I need you to think and have some humility.
Here's
too.
a good one for the captains out there. Ask your first officer questions about themselves.
Yeah. Yeah.
I remember that. It's still that guy that never asked
Didn't
you
know
a
my
question
name
about
after
yourself.
40. I mean, but
still upset about
they're
it.
just talking the whole time, and it's just, yeah. Anyways, we could go on forever. There's a lot of meat left on the bone.
Well, and plus, if things do go sideways, there is a lot of good ways to mess with the captain. And,
We've
get payback, so
detailed that in
that in mind.
great depth on our show before.
in previous
All right.
episodes.
Well, we've got more to discuss with you, Nick, and so we'll be excited to have more follow-up conversations with you. You're going to quickly surpass our episode total here pretty quick. So you're going to be so much more experienced podcaster in just a few months. It's going to be unbelievable to watch your journey. The Ready for Pushback podcast can be found on all of the major platforms. We'll have a link in the show notes to that. I encourage folks to take a look at the incredible list of folks in industry that you've talked to. And that's really impressive to me. And when you say, people are lining up to talk to you, I think I know why. After having a conversation with you for an hour and a half, you're great at being able to interview, and the angle you take is beautiful. So I really encourage folks to listen to your show. I think they're going to get a lot of value out of it.
when I start doing drug running, maybe you guys will fly out to see me and we'll just sit down for like 2 days straight.
Yeah. After you've been out of prison for 30 years. So yeah, it'll be good.
We'll come visit you in that Mexican prison.
Oh my gosh. Man, you guys are awesome. What a treat. Thank you so much for having me on the show.
Well, it was great chatting with Nick. It's cool to hear that we inspired somebody to start their own podcast, and I think he's probably doing a better job than we are now at it. So the student has become the master.
It's different. It's a different focus.
Yeah, that's true.
He's the Lone Ranger, just all by himself, just talking to executives while we're us two talking to drug dealers.
We're talking about chain restaurants. I don't think he's breaking down the O'Charlie's and the Texas Roadhouse. I don't think
it's a different podcast, but right. Very flattering that we inspired him, but he does a great job. He's a sharp dude, and he's going to do obviously very well. So it's fun. I have a feeling we will be talking to Nick again.
Okay, let's try our best to help an airman in need, and we should do that in the flight advice segment. No Diamond Dog for this one. It's just you and I, but I think we can muddle our way through it. Hopefully, folks enjoy the flight advice segment. It is always brought to you by our friends at Harvey Watt, harveywatt.com. You can check out all of the insurance offerings that they provide for professional pilots. Most importantly, I would say, is your loss of medical insurance. That white piece of paper that is awkward and weird, and you have to cut part of it out and put it in your wallet and show it sometimes. It's really important. You're not going to earn a paycheck without it, but it can be really easy to lose if you don't know what you're doing. Harvey Watt is there to help consult when there's questions and protect your income if you ever lose that piece of paper. HarveyWatt.com. Thank you so much. On to the flight advice. Max, go ahead.
Hey guys, I love the show. I've always learned something and laugh along the way. You guys have well-rounded experience, so maybe you can give me some valuable advice about my current dilemma. I'm currently at a regional airline and truly enjoy the flying, but I'm starting to think about what's next for me. The dilemma is at this time I'm not willing to relocate, and I live in Wyoming. Here's some more information about commutability living here. There are 4 to 5 flights a day to Denver, 1 to Salt Lake, a 3.5-hour drive to Denver International, perfect world scenario, and I can generally get on any flight out. I'm seriously contemplating Southwestern NetJets. On one hand, NetJet solves the commuting, period. Great benefits and a predictable schedule. However, you'll never make as much as a captain at a major grinding, and you're also throwing bags, serving passengers, and cleaning. Southwest will ultimately yield more days off per month. I would anticipate the ability to make more money and a faster-paced environment, which I enjoy, but you have to commute. And if that initial base assignment is anything other than Denver, it is a 2-leg commute. Seniority is truly everything at an airline. While it could potentially set me back a couple thousand numbers, I could give the corporate world a try and go back to an airline if I hated it. Thanks, guys. Lane. All right.
Okay.
So
this is right in our wheelhouse.
Well,
I feel like we've done this one before.
So he obviously commutes already to a regional, right? I don't know a regional with a base in Wyoming, and he kind of knows the commute structure there. So you know what the commute's like, and you also know that having the ability to drive to work is, there's commutes that you have to commute by airplane, and there are commutes where you can go by airplane, but you can drive if you need to or you want to. He's obviously in category 2, which is huge, but 3.5 hours every week, or
that's 7 hours.
Yeah, that's a lot
per trip.
That's a lot of time. And again, now I guess let's address this. Yeah, it would be a 2-leg commute anywhere. That would be really rough. That's always temporary. Any airline pilot, you have to count on commuting for some point in your career. It's the long-term play where you want to live somewhere. If you don't want to commute, where ultimately you can be based and you will not have to commute. So I would say if you have to do a 2-legger for a little while, suck it up. Like it's short-term pain for long-term gain. But that being said, you're very likely to get Denver right out of class or very, very soon after, given the way things are at Southwest right now. So I wouldn't worry about that. But he likes the regional flying, so he likes that, which a lot of Southwest is very similar. So
shout out Lubbock and
Amarillo.
Amarillo.
You'll like it, and yeah, it's a good gig. But commuting, as I'm sure Lane knows we're vehemently opposed to, if you can at all avoid it. But, you know, if that's where you want to live, that's where you want to live. And the good news is, if it ever becomes too much, you can move closer to Denver, and you will still not be that far from the place you were living or wanted to live. But if that's never going to be an option, I think you have to have a long, hard talk with yourself if you want to sentence yourself to a career of commuting, or like he said, you can solve that problem real easy at NetJets.
Yeah. Okay. So I think this is really interesting because I think we may have addressed this in the show before, and I was hoping to grab one of our friends that drives about 2 hours each way. Unfortunately, he wasn't available, but there's a number of distance and time where I think the drive doesn't make sense. And my guess is 2 hours is about sort of where you would draw the line. Would you guess that? Maybe 2.5?
I don't know, dude. It's so hard to say because even at that, like, if you look at the time from when you leave your house till you are walking into the terminal, and you compare that to flying versus driving, like the total time investment is probably pretty similar.
Yeah.
I mean, and the thing is,
a good point.
No.
It's a good point.
I take that back. The time you leave your house till you're sign-in, right? So if you're driving, you're getting there right at your sign-in time, assumably, right?
Do you have to have a backup flight at Southwest?
No, not if it's on the company flight option. If it's offline, if you like if you live in like this dude, which is a really good point. We don't fly to Wyoming that I'm aware of, so you would have to have 2 flights on and offline. So that's the total time suck.
Okay.
Because you don't get to choose the time. So not only the flight may be quicker, but you may get there 2 hours before you're signing. You're hanging out. So the problem is driving sucks, but are you spending more time? Probably not, because you have the flexibility, right? But then a freaking winter storm rolls in, all bets are off, I suppose.
Okay, so I just picked a random day in September. Okay, it does look like there's only one carrier that runs this, or it's under United that runs from the city in Wyoming to Denver. The first flight out is at 7:30. The second flight out is at 9. And the 9 o'clock would get you in at 10:30, 10:20. So you realistically, like if you had an 11 a.m. sign in, so you're going to fly like a PM, you've got to be there by 10:20 a.m. or like but you've got to try and catch that earlier flight too, which means, I mean, you're smoking at least 6 hours prior, if not more.
Yeah, that's just a long time. What I would say is this. I would say talk to your wife, yourself, and say, listen, I will give this commute my best effort. But if it becomes intolerable, is it an option to move to base? And if that answer is no, that there's not an option given your situation, then you need to really, really consider maybe another option. Because I can't think of a worse thing than to be trapped in a miserable commute that you have no option of because of your life circumstance of, which again, he says seniority is everything, and he could try NetJets and then go back to the airlines. I would argue the other way around.
That's what I was going to recommend.
Yeah. Try it and determine if it is possible for you to move or not, if this becomes untenable. And even if the answer to that is no, then say, well, if this becomes untenable, then I will have to make a change and go to NetJets. I would have a plan. Have a plan.
That's what I would do. I would give it a year. And then the other thing, and we've talked about this before on the show too, like because he's specifically mentioned Southwest, and we have some knowledge of how their schedules work. Southwest, this is a sweeping generalization, but it's pretty accurate. You're either starting really early or you're finishing really late. Right? So there's no you're not finishing most trips at, 5 p.m. and then you have like a a nice leisurely drive back, in the evening, and you can listen to the baseball game. Like you're getting into the terminal like 10, 11 best case scenario, right? PM.
Well, I mean,
if you're
there are exceptions to everything, but by and large, yes, you were there 10, 9, at least 9 something, but usually around 10 something, 11.
So then you're going to stack a 3.5 hour drive on top of that.
Yeah. Or you're going to have a 5 a.m. or 5:30 show or whatever. And so you're going to leave it,
You're almost going to, even if you're driving, you're buying a hotel.
You're eating a day either way. Which in that scenario, realistically, if you're eating a day either way, then maybe you just, then fly. Kind of the flight schedule's less. You're wasting a whole day. So it's not like
you're wasting a whole day whether you're flying or driving, though.
Yeah. So.
Yeah.
Be prepared. Man. Put a camper shell in your pickup. Who knows?
Something. I mean, seriously, like, can you get an RV and keep it? Because you're going to be spending,
thought about this. What I would do is like have a pickup truck with a camper, like a small camper on it that has heat and water and just the basics. And
the only problem is you don't want to be driving that thing 3.5 hours each way.
Yeah, I know. And Denver's not like there's a million hotels right around Denver either.
Sprinter van. It might be seriously like Sprinter van deal. So I don't know, man. That's a tough one there. I agree with Max. Do it for a year, see what you think, and then maybe go the fractional route if you can't hack it. But it's going to be painful.
Yeah, it will be painful. I hope there's a very, very good reason that you need to live in Casper.
Yep.
And a lot of guys that I fly with have said, yeah, it's a commute. What everyone always says about commute is it's not that bad. No one ever says it's great or it's fun. It's not that bad.
This is great. So relaxing.
Like, and he's like, yeah, I'd move, but my wife won't let me. So I can't stress enough. Have the conversation up front about this rather than negotiating from a position of weakness after you're already locked in.
I like this power spouse negotiation.
Well, not that. Negotiate when you're on level ground. Just say, look, dude, I don't know how this is going to work, but I need to know now.
Yeah.
What your feelings are on this.
100%. 100%. All right. That is it for flight advice. HarveyWatt.com. Thank you so much for your long time. Did you remember they were the first sponsors of our show?
That's right.
You negotiated that deal. And then I remember I was like driving home and you called me and he was like, well, we're officially professional broadcasters.
Now we have responsibility. We can't just quit.
No, we just can't take the summer off. Oh, but we still did. Well, thanks to everyone who writes in. We love giving advice. Hopefully it's helpful. And again, we can't solve everybody's problems. There's too many variables, but at least we're hoping that we give you things to think about
Lane,
when you're kind of...
Here's what I ask of you. We gave you the advice you requested. Now I need something. I need you to let us know what happens in 6 months.
Mm-hmm.
So we are recording this right now on August 1st. I'll need an update in 6 months.
Come on. Also, we need to know the best chain restaurant in Casper.
Plus or minus 30 days.
Yeah. Okay. That is it. For number 104, it's good to be back behind the microphone after a little bit of vacation. Thanks to everyone that wrote in for flight advice and the mailbag and the reviews. It's always great to hear from folks. We love the interaction. Info at 215podcast.com. You can also visit our website for the anonymous form for flight advice if you don't want to share your identity. We're always happy to give it a stab and try and help out. Thanks to our sponsors, Advanced Aircrew Academy, Tim Pope, Harvey Watt, Veris Jet Sales, and of course the Air Comp Calculator. I got a lot of feedback from folks saying it was a real helpful when we did the monthly or the quarterly update with them. More of those to come. Here we go. Max, school's about to start for our kids. We're getting back in the groove. Lots more episodes coming your way. Until then, remember, when you're planning your summer vacation,
flexibility is the key to family time in the summer.
That's right.
We'll see you next time if you're a corporate pilot.
See you guys.
Vanguard.
The statements made in this show are our own opinions and do not reflect, nor were they under any direction from any of our employers.